Welcome to episode 20 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week, we talk about every home team, except for one, winning their matches. We talk about North Melbourne getting their second victory, and the curse of Damien Hardwick at Marvel Stadium continues. We talk about Geelong fighting their way back into the finals contention against the winner of Hawthorn, Fremantle trying to solidify a top 4 spot, and plenty of other very interesting bits and pieces to come out of this week. So, let's get started. How are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Not too bad. Had a pretty good day. Caught up with my friend. It's his birthday today, so we went out for lunch, and yeah, apart from that, just catching up on the rest of the notes after a pretty big round of football. Very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting week.
Yeah, well, the good thing is like I was out in the more blowout-y games, and I got to sit down for a couple of really good contests. Especially the GWS Carlton one, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And very big upset with the Saints and the Swans.
It was another Logan McDonald kick.
We'll get there, poor fella.
Hey, at least he got the score this time. It just wasn't the score that they wanted.
Yeah. Oh, it's a much better kick. It's just, as I said, sometimes when it rains, they pour, as they say. And,
that's true.
Yeah.
Well,
good couple of weeks, but
shall we start? Shall we start with the only away team, or quote unquote away team, that won this week?
Oh yeah, okay.
Because you've got the game.
I forgot I was starting this week. Yeah, no, I got it. I've done the notes. It's all good. But yeah, it's the statement win for Essendon. The media very focused on the victory against the top 8 team. Very funnily enough, they still could have not won against a top 8 team with this win. Because, I think there were some permutations where Collingwood could drop out and leave no team. But, I mean, it's all a bit silly, isn't it?
Yeah, like, especially with how close the competition is, it doesn't technically matter.
Yeah, exactly. It really needs to be extended to probably top 11, isn't it? That's really...
Maybe top 12.
Consistently into it.
It's severely close.
I mean, as I said, even like Gold Coast and Hawthorn, chuck them into the mix. As I said. So, as the main thing is, it was very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, it looked like it wasn't going to get there for a while. Pye's transition was very good, going from the back half with absolute ease, while the Dons missed some easy, but not really... not easy, but also very gettable shots in the first quarter. And really, it was 3 quick goals by... I'm going to say it. You pumped him up last week. So, Blazy's own Jack Crisp.
I did. I did indeed pump him up last week.
Yeah, so, you know what? Probably listen to the podcast. Probably like, you know what? Gonna have some eyes on me. Gotta give him a show. And yeah, that was pretty much the wedge between the teams in the first quarter. And from then, Essendon would continue to dominate. And it wasn't just because they were controlling possession, which they really like to do.
Mm-hmm.
They also sort of dismantled Collingwood defensively, I thought. There were a lot of players sort of doing their roles in sort of a very disciplined way, halted their ball movement. Yeah, it was very good in the first half, sort of slowed down the entire mark. And yeah, as I said, they dismantled Collingwood's defense. They generated a very nice 19 set shots and 18 marks inside 50 and kicking 11-5 from them for the night. So, as I said, Collingwood sort of lowered their colours after quarter time. Another defensive performance. Sam Durran took what was, again, we've talked about like sort of the difference between like a light and a heavy tagging role. He took a light tagging role on Nick Kadakos.
Mm-hmm.
So he rendered his... allowed him to get the clearances a lot of the time, but he was on him so much. He was very ineffective with a lot of his disposal. And it was pretty much the theme for Collingwood at quarter time because Collingwood were able to get the ball, but Essendon's pressure that they were able to provide in the one-on-one matchups turned them from fast ball movement to very struggling, very turnover-based ball movement, and they just struggled to get multi-possession chains.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a very well-rounded performance from Essendon. One thing that I thought was very nice, discounting the subs, the Dons' lowest possession getters had 11 with Cox and Laverde. with Collingwood's having 11 players either equaling or lowering that count. So, and that's, again, it would be 13 if you're including the subs for Collingwood. So, yeah, Essendon had a lot of performers. Collingwood had a lot of players that weren't quite there.
They just had a lot of
And
travellers, as some would say.
yeah, I mean, I'll get into it in a bit. But yeah, as I thought it was very top heavy from a couple of their players. And again, there was a few players that couldn't quite get set up. Obviously, partially due to Essendon. Biggest one, of course, being Nick Dacos. But yeah, as I said, it was just statistical dominates from the first quarter. And they would win impressively 12-8-80 to 13-14-92. And we keep on raving about him. But you know he's going to come up as the first player mentioned. The big man for Essendon, Zach Merritt. Honestly, and we might talk about it soon, his Brownlow chances.
Honestly, I agree. Especially because if Heaney's going to be out, Bont and Cripps, probably still the front runners. I don't think it's anyone's doubt at the moment. But Merritt, sneaky top 5 chance at the moment, at the very least.
I think there's underrated in terms of Brownlow because people are conflating like Essendon performing above what they want as if like that affects the Brownlow count at all. Because like
no,
it
doesn't.
Won a handful of games, and Merritt's been more often than not the best player. So
and like you look at
as I said,
and like you look at years past, it hasn't always been like high ranked teams to have players winning Brownlows.
It's normally the most teams with the most consistent. I mean, well, I guess like it's a bit different, but when Wines, for example, won the Brownlow, it was just because he was the most consistently best of a pretty functioning Port midfield. And honestly, and I'll get through the stats in the name. It's actually pretty funny because it's like this midfield, it's based around Merritt, but it's all people complimenting Merritt. It's not like Merritt's the only one putting in effort, which was like sort of what you might accuse of like last year. But this one, yeah, Merritt's just been the chief distributor, the hard nut. 30 disposals.
Sorry to cut you off briefly, but it's a really interesting way to put it because you look at a team like Gold Coast, for an example. They have multiple key contributors, and whilst they look good, they're all star players. They don't entirely complement each other because they all have very similar game styles.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas you look at Essendon, and they all complement their captain, their key focal player in the midfield.
Yeah, exactly. Like Cardwell, he can do the tagging jobs. Is also, is a bit more rough nut, can get the tackles in. Sam Durham is very good at forward ball movement. That's another one I'm forgetting. I mean, even just in the ruck.
Jade Gresham?
No, I meant in the ruck.
In the ruck. This week it was Draper. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it was a pretty impressive effort, considering Goldstein out. As I said, it's not too hard to imagine that they're gonna go straight to Draper once they get the 1 or 2 years that they get out of Goldstein. And I think this game was him putting his hand up and saying, yeah, I'm going to be that person. Because, as I said, few contested possessions, few clearances. And honestly, I won't say shut down Cameron, but, it's one of those ruck performances where he made a very good ruckman not that effective. So, and, as I said, he had all rights to be beaten. He's still young. He's not exactly a craft ruckman I'd have at this point. Like, he's still a forward ruck in my mind. But there's
similar to the role that
there when his body.
Tom de Koning is playing at Carlton, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Like, as I said, like, he's still sort of a forward, but if his body continues and his ruck craft hones, like, you can see that leap to where you're just like a dangerous main ruck that can go forward more than a forward that can play ruck. But yeah, I'll go back to the specific because this game deserves the stat countdown. 30 disposals, 10 contested at 80% efficiency, 474 meters gained, 5 clearances, 6 intercepts, and an insane 15 score involvements with 6 being started off his own possessions, 29 pressure acts, 1 goal, 1. Honestly, I think statistically this was the second highest rated game. The one on Tom de Koning, I think it was last week, got first.
Was that last week or the week before? Something like that. It was very, very recent.
Yeah,
Very recent.
Carlton vs Geelong. Yeah, I think it might be a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, honestly, it probably was one of the best individual performances this year. And it, as I said, Caldwell, the other statistical standout for Essendon, because there wasn't that much. It was more even disposals and contributions. 30 possessions, 14 contested, 8 clearances, and 7 forward involvements. In terms of just solo players, because yeah, we've got Ridley, Shield, Langford, Draper, and McKay. I thought all had solid nights. Langford obviously leading the inside 50 marks with 4, got 2 goal twos and 9 score involvements.
Not bad.
And despite getting only a goal each, Gresham and Guelphy were very prolific, having 10 score involvements each. Guelphy also getting 3 tackles inside 50, wrapping on the pressure. And very hyped in the game, a bit inaccurate, but young Caddy.
Nate Caddy?
Sorry, Nate Caddy is
Nate Caddy.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. Very lively. Unfortunately, only scored 1 goal free, but you could tell the excitement that was just generated by him being an option. So yeah, like some of the young people coming through, like if he can provide on target, it's a very easy thing to fix in your game. As I said, it can provide with Essendon with another secondary target. And give it, Peter Wright a bit of a hand. As I said, I like Peter Wright. He has a good mark, but I wouldn't say he's the best leader, quote unquote, in terms of like leading patterns.
Yeah.
So
I agree. He's a little bit off step when it comes to those sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, it might just be the hand that he sort of needs. And yeah, so that's the main ones for Essendon. For Collingwood, there was a huge chasm between Scott Pendlebury, Steele Sidebottom, and Crisp, and the rest of the team. It was a bit alarming, I would say. Pendles was amazing. 24 disposals at 95% efficiency. With 6 tackles and 8 score involvements.
The old boys still got it.
I know. Like, it was definitely a very or old version Pendlebury game, but, as I said, he still plays like he's young. And yeah, as I said, Dacos, I will say, as I said, he was neutered, high disposal count. I didn't write it. Why didn't I do that? Let's see. 31 disposals. Marred by going at 41% efficiency and recording only 3 score involvements. And, honestly, his 17 contested possessions was basically just Durham giving him no space at the contest. Like, that's sort of when stats lie to you, because you can see that and think, oh, well, at least he was like, in and around the contest. I think like 17 contested possessions actually made Durham's game look that much better.
When you're looking at stats, you can look at a high disposal count and you look at like a high contested disposal count. But if the effectiveness is low, then you know that they've been tagged.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I don't think it'll get like any coaches though, so I don't think anyone will get suckered in by that. But you know what I mean?
It's like I hope not.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where like sometimes you gotta take every game. And I'm not saying like Nick Dacos is bad, but I think teams have sort of realized that the best way isn't to like limit his disposal, it's to limit his effectiveness.
Yeah.
And it's something young player, he's going to work on it. There's no reason to be alarmed.
It's something that a lot of teams started to do against Dangerfield and against Lockie Neal.
Yeah, Like, I say Dangerfield especially.
Granted,
Neal has that ability to work out.
When Geelong were at like their peak, like just 2 years ago, for example. Same with Brisbane. Like they were always getting tagged. And they would still have high disposal counts, but their effectiveness would drop off.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of the same thing that they've started to pick up with Nick Dacos.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, I take that back. I think Neil is just like their midfield core, sort of like work through that. But And it's
But
something that
now,
Collingwood
now
might
that
need to do.
Dunkley and Cam Rayner and players like that have started to come into their own, going through midfield and the forward line,
Yeah, exactly.
it's definitely a lot less on Neil. But yeah,
Mm. But yeah, as that is like the other problem with like, some of your other better midfielders being veterans as well.
mm.
Um, as I said, it means that they might want to look for a slightly bigger bodied midfielder. As you keep on saying, like it might have been something that would have been nice if they still had Taylor Adams, but
Well, that's
salary
that's where
caps are
Jack
salary
Crisp
caps.
is meant to step in, and he's been doing pretty well so far.
Yeah, he is. I still think he's more forward generating than he is
Yeah, he
you
is.
know.
But I do think
Um
he looks pretty good when he's in the midfield. But I don't think it's always going to be his permanent role.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Mm.
Like as I said, he's not bad defensively, but as I said, if they need someone to lift, I don't think it's quite going to be Jack Crisp in terms of getting Nick Dacos free.
Yeah,
But yeah, so that just is what it is. As I said, bit of a huge gap from there, and yeah, again, this game just sort of highlights the cutthroat thing of the ladder. Uh, the cutthroat nature of the ladder at the moment. The Pies fall out the 8 with that loss after all that settled with this round. Despite, I think I said that there were the biggest chances getting spot 3 or 4 in terms of the top 4. So,
but they still
I,
technically have a chance, but it's
oh,
very
they
very
still would.
slim now.
I wouldn't even say that, but yeah, I think there has been a bit of just a shakiness to this last month. Like I think we saw them get players back, and we thought, oh, they should build from here, but they've
Oh,
almost taken a step backwards.
that's why I tipped them,
I
and they
think,
let me down.
yeah, well, I don't think many people tipped Essendon, but as I said, it's just a bit disappointing. Defensively, I said I don't want to highlight him too much, but he's his captain. Moore just got towed up by young Nate Caddy, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And that really isn't something you would expect to happen. I mean, good on Nate Caddy. Like, I'm not going to take away from him, but you know what I mean? It's just, you know, you just don't expect that from one of your players that you're defending on defensively. As I said, Draper, I would say fairly solidly beating Cameron. Again, something that you wouldn't quite expect. And it's just like those little matchups for Collingwood that aren't quite going their way and haven't been going their way all season.
Mm.
It just sort of gelled a bit more during this last or the month before this month, when they were pretty in form. So yeah, as I said, I wouldn't say it's star for them, but they've definitely got some defensive tuning to do,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And yeah, as I said, the grid of Essendon, absolutely fantastic. I've mentioned before, it's, as I said, the way I see it, it's sort of like Zach Merritt and his group of hound dogs. You know what I mean? It's just like you got Zach Merritt there, like you got the hound dogs just feeding him the ball, and he'll just do something dangerous, send it to a pretty potent forward line. Sometimes a bit off. But as I said, when it's on, it gets the job pretty well. I think they're averaging a bit over 70 points per game. And
Yeah, off the top of my head, that sounds right.
and as I said, Collingwood could really do little but to get bullied by the Ferocious Dons. And yeah, as I said, it was pretty lackluster performance barring a few moments of solid attack momentum.
Mm-hmm.
The Pies did get back into it a bit late, but honestly, I think that was just sort of it just sort of, I think, had to happen with how hard Essendon were going at it. Like, it's very hard to play that hard for an entire game, and especially with Collingwood. But you still have some pretty good high-end talent. But as I said, it's just Collingwood's effort was making them. Well, I said technically both their efforts were making it unsustainable. It's just Collingwood's was their lower half of their players not performing too well. Whereas Essendon was just like an insane amount of pressure.
Yeah.
And yeah, they could have gotten a lot more. Like 92 was probably unders for them. A bit of better goal kicking, especially there. I think Nate Caddy was the only one that was failing their set shots. It was mainly the ground level shots
Mm-hmm.
from set play. Uh, yeah, that were missing. But yeah, as I said, overall, very good performance for Essendon. obviously consolidates them for being a big threat. Well, not big threat. I mean, they're still Essendon, but you know what I mean.
I
It's
think
just
they've
like,
definitely solidified top 8 probably at this point. Granted, their run home
yeah,
is still fairly tough, but I can see
I
them.
think it is. I think they've done enough.
I can see them
Um,
consolidating top 8 at the very least.
yeah, and that's the thing. Is like, you know what? Like their draw hasn't been easy. Like as I said, like I know they've got sub 100 percentage, 99.9 is very much a meme.
It is very much a
Um,
meme.
this week, yeah. Um, but honestly, it's just like week in, week out. Like I've never really been. It's been a couple of matches, and considering their list, I just think as I said, from expectations, they've just greatly outperformed.
Mm.
And as I said, like you can't really just because they're playing out above what you expect them to, doesn't mean you can like take away it from the same thing. Like, yeah, they're not convincing, but no one expected them to be convincing. Um, and they've been pretty damn good. So I think you just got to take that. Brad Scott's, I think, done a pretty great job with his philosophy. They've got a definite brand now, something that they've sort of been lacking for the last few years. And yeah, players can just glowing together. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more. Oh yeah, I think I mentioned Majacek. I think he has to. I saw it. He's going to miss a bit of time due to his shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
He did
sure.
another injury, didn't he?
Yeah. It was a dislocated shoulder. I think he might be out for a month. I just forgot to put it into my notes. So
It
I
takes
apologize for that.
James Sisley 2 weeks to get over a dislocated shoulder. He could man up.
Yeah, but I must admit, like he's had problems with the shoulder before, so
Yeah, that's
um,
true.
hopefully it's not um, a big one. And he did return to the ground. He didn't get subbed off. But yeah, it was definitely impacted. And Ben McKay, yeah, just sort of gave him a hard time. It's definitely it was definitely a tough day out for him.
Yeah, well, you take
Yeah,
any
so
advantage you can get, right?
oh no, like as I said, like Ben McKay was giving him a buff beforehand, but
Now it was
then
even
to
more of
go,
a buff.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so pretty much that it. Again, there's still the positive, I think, for Collingwood is some of the younger players still playing very well. Harvey Harrison, even though he's subbed out, I think, Charlie Dean, I don't think it was like the whole problem for their backline. I think that was just sort of a substitution to try and change things up a bit. But yeah, as I said, so, a couple of good kids performing. Yeah, as I said, they'll probably need to look at how they can recapture some of the form they had when they had less players. But yeah, AFL's a funny game sometimes. It doesn't pay out as the team on paper presents itself. So yeah, they just got to search for it. But yeah, really good game for Essendon.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on then to Saturday's games, where we'll start at Marvel Stadium with North Melbourne getting their second win of the season, continuing the Dimma hates Marvel Stadium curse that he started at Richmond 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I believe his track record in total now is like 9 losses and a draw since he said that.
Yep, that is true.
Which is really, really funny. And on top of this win, it also sent Richmond to 18th position on the ladder.
Yeah, so it's sort of.
I will talk about that when I go over the Richmond Freo game, but I'm actually pretty indifferent about it. I'm not as hurt by it as some fans might be.
Yeah, I know. It's a shame because it is the first time they're 18th on the ladder.
Since
sort of
since
funny
all
that
18 teams have been introduced, it's the first time we've been in 18th.
Yeah, and their premiership coach sent them there, albeit very indirectly. But yeah, football just has a funny way of writing its own storylines when it comes to that.
The storylines are certainly intertwined in mysterious ways.
But storyline for North,
yeah,
they're not last.
This is something that we've been talking about pretty much all season long, and they've been working towards something pretty special towards the end of this season. Granted, it's not going to result in something massive, but it gives them hope that they have something that works that they can continue to work on and especially with some of the injuries that they still have on the sidelines that they could still get back. And like they still have plenty of options to be able to build up their defensive game a lot more because that's the area that they've always kind of been lacking in, as we've talked about. But like this,
it's been better.
Yeah, and the fact that they're winning games and they're actually looking pretty decent probably gives them an opportunity to reach out to other players to say, we can be a club you might want to come to now that they have something to work with.
Yeah, it's a point that I was going to make a bit later, and I guess you just brought it up now, so I'll mention it. But yeah, as I said, like, I'm not fully sold on North Melbourne at the moment, but I also think that's why these games are so important, because as you said, like, it's a lot easier to say, okay, we're a team, we can get certain things going. We just need, like, obviously the biggest thing would, if they can somehow get a key position player,
specifically a defender,
a bit more ready-made.
Yeah,
I would say specifically a defender, but at least if you got a forward, you could maybe either A, alter things around, or B, draft a defender.
Yeah, because like Nick Larkey does a lot up in the forward line, but he definitely needs some help.
Exactly. He sure does. But yeah, so as I said, but as I say, because look, I'm gonna say, like, I've still been a bit skeptical, and look, I might have had a bit of egg on my face because I was definitely in the camp that the Suns were going to win this, and not win this comfortably, but
hey, I went with my gut and I tipped North. I believed in the curse, and the curse won out.
Yeah, I understand that, but you know what I mean? It's like I'm not sold, and even in this game slightly.
No, I do agree with you because like
some fantastic performances, but North Melbourne dominated the stats in this.
They did. They really, really did.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna go through it in a sec.
By
4 points.
Was it 5 points? 4 points. Sorry.
Yeah, it was still super close, and realistically, it was still very much a coin flip game.
Yeah, exactly.
Gold Coast still haven't been able to break winning away from home. All of the wins this season still have only been on the Gold Coast.
Yeah,
haven't even been in Brisbane. Only the Gold Coast. And North Melbourne, yeah, like they may not be a destination club, but at least they're showing something to opposition players or players looking for a new home.
These are the things you need as a club to get that 1 or 2 free agencies that just help the rebuild.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to knock them because, as I said, like, I don't believe in the overall structure, but they've got some players really playing their heart out. They've got at least an area which they can pride themselves on, which is the midfield.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always convert, but at least it's functioning, and their defense is getting better as well, which looked in absolute rambles. Like I said before, a month ago, I would say, like, aligned with West Coast here, how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's saying, you know what, this is like AFL standard still, like,
they've finally hit a decent stride, and
it's not something that I'm like, yeah, I'm ruling North out purely because I can't believe they can defend anything. You know what I mean? Like, if they're on their best,
absolutely,
they might be able to kick a team under. So, yeah, props to them.
Absolutely, props to them. So I'm gonna, run through some of the statistics now, starting with my favorite player of the team at this point in time. Well, maybe second favorite. I do love George Wardlaw. Harry Sheezel, of course. Absolute belter of a game. 35 touches, 74.3% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 8 marks, 5 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 4 score involvements, 5 tackles, and 17 pressure acts. Finally moved to the midfield, and he looks right where he should belong. I know he's kind of been drifting between midfield and the back line because George Wardlaw is primarily the on-baller in the midfield, but Sheezel just looks so good in the midfield, and I think they can make it work having both Wardlaw and Sheezel in there. They just need to probably move a couple of pieces around.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he took like as many centre bounces, but as I said, when he's just like a player that is like, I think the most impact is the around the ground stoppages.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is so dangerous up forward as well means that, as I said, he can he can sort of play like that positionless back half, or you could play him purely in the midfield,
and he doesn't even
know.
have to play on ball. He can play a wing role as well because he has the legs for it too.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, like there's only been 2 games this year where he's played over 50% centre bounces. So yeah, as I said, like, and he still racks up, and he's still like an important part of that midfield core.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. It's just like I think it's just like amazing how good his distribution is, and also it still allows room for other players to play really good games. I think that's one of the most positive things you can say about Harry Sheezel is just like some people say, oh, it's not imposing enough, but it's just like he's just doing exactly what he needs to do in all areas of the ground. And for a young kid, that's insane.
Absolutely. Like he's what? This is his 3rd year, I think.
2nd year, I think.
I can't remember. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure George Wardlaw
last year I got my Sheezels out for Sheezel.
I'm pretty sure this is his 3rd year, but I think he was injured for a lot of last year.
Yeah, could be
something like that. Anyway, because I know Wardlaw's 1st year was last year. I know that much, but I can't remember when Sheezel was picked up.
I'll check right now. I just slow typing. Sorry.
No, go for it. I'm gonna rattle off stats for the next player, which is Charlie Comben. I thought he was very, very good in defense. 17 touches at 88.2% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 10 intercept possessions, 9 marks, 12 pressure acts, and 5 1%ers. Very, very good at stopping Gold Coast push into the forward line, especially from Matt Rowell and like Ainsworth. Took Miller before he was injured. Very, very good job of stopping a lot of their forward entries. And again, the backline has always been their weakest part, and it's good to see players like Compen stepping up, making a lot of effort, starting some plays, maybe even some chains to up forward. Very, very strong performance.
Yeah, it's just like that backline player they can build around. Like, obviously, Aiden Core is obviously getting a bit maligned. But I think he's played a bit better now that
he did play a little more of an underrated role this week, Aiden Core, but
that's what I'm saying.
Still very consistent.
Yeah, it's taken a bit of pressure off Core because, as I said, like, I mean, when you get Aiden Core into your team, you know what you're getting with Aiden Core. He was never the standout at GWS, so it was sort of hard for him playing that main.
No, he's always played a sort of an underrated sort of role.
Yeah, well, he's sort of played under like Nick Haynes and obviously, what do you call him? Just one of the best defensive players of all time, Sam Taylor.
Yes.
So, as I said, like it is hard to adjust. And obviously he didn't do it early on, but I think this balanced role, as I said, it's what good coaches do. You get a pressure player and you're like, what can I do to make him perform better? And, as I said, obviously he has. And I think it's good that he's, tried to hold his head high, despite, as I said, being a bit of a whipping boy early on in that really trash defense.
Yeah.
The first few weeks.
Well, at least they're showing promising signs. And then to round off the North Melbourne sort of highlighted players, Captain Jai Simpkin had a great performance, really strong captain's game. Him, Harry Sheezel, George Wardlaw, very key trio in that midfield, especially if they keep Sheezel in the midfield. But yeah, Simpkin just stepped up massively. 28 touches, 75% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 8 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 6 score involvements, 5 tackles, 19 pressure acts. Sadly, only a behind in terms of conversion, but he was massive in terms of getting the ball inside forward 50. I'm pretty sure a lot of his inside 50s were actually straight to Nick Larkey as well, which was very important. Nick Larkey, I believe, kicked 3 goals. I didn't write it down, but that's off the top of my head. He was leading goal scorer last I checked.
Yes.
So
3-0.
Yeah. So, he's still adding to his tally for the Coleman. Not that he's really in the race, but, top 10 still a good position.
Yeah. I think what was interesting, and I didn't watch enough of the game to confirm this, but I did read it as a stat. Like, they were a bit Nick Larkey conscious, going to him a lot of the time.
Well, I mean, he is
And then
their
they
only
started.
like key tall forward, so it's
Oh no, I was
understandable.
going to say, like, promising sign in the last quarter. Bryn Teakle, who they sort of brought
Oh
in.
yeah,
He's been
Tickle pushed
struggling to
forward,
find a
didn't he?
role a bit. And then, yeah, as I said, managed to find 2 late goals, a couple of good contested marks, sort of helped them get a lot across the line. So, as I said, maybe, as obviously it's too short a time period, it could just be a surprise move that catches them off guard. But
Mm.
hopefully he might find a bit of good forward time because, as I said, I've watched him a bit, obviously, former Port player. Definitely, I don't think quite AFL standard yet, but he's got an offensive mindset. He definitely could be a good tall fucking forward that can rock, but
Mm.
yeah, as I said, he a bit of a tank problem for Teakle. If he can get fit, yeah, he needs a bit of energy to run out of game for that to be a viable option, but something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's kind of part of why I want to wait and see what happens with North next season because Callum Coleman Jones is still out with an ACL injury that he did in the
Yeah, exactly.
preseason games, and he's normally their primary ruck forward to go
Yeah.
alongside Larky. So I want to see kind of where that ends up once he's back on the park.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying like Brent Tickle might even survive this year's list, but as I said, if they can find a use for him, just to give him an option,
Oh yeah, for
um,
sure.
as I said,
Like if you've
it
got the
might.
players, may as well make it work.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as I said, they've tried that with Toby Pink at times, and he managed to score a goal. But yeah, I mean, you and I both know Toby Pink is not
No, he is
a
not a forward.
reliable forward option. Trying, but yeah,
Try as you might, but do what you can. All right, and
exactly.
then just to shout out a couple of Gold Coast players that I thought had great games. McAndrew, strong defensive game, 16 touches at 87.5% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 6 intercept possessions, 4 inside 50s, 4 score involvements, only 6 pressure acts, which is a little bit low, but he had 3 1%ers, and I believe he played a predominant one-on-one role, or
Oh,
like
he
a
almost won them the game.
pack role in general. Yeah, no, he's very, very strong.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant ruck roll at the very end, because he had to go in the ruck
He did
in
have
one
to
of
go
the
on the
last.
like it could have won them the
And
game, that rock.
yeah, there was like that one contest where he put the ball forward, and I think he was that the one where they got it to Ainsworth and he missed. I think that was the
Possibly.
play. Yeah, but
Uh,
anyway, so
but yeah, McAndrew, another strong
influential,
defensive role.
influential.
I do really like. He's been very, very, very good this season. Even if
Oh,
definitely one of their
absolutely.
most
His
improved
development's
players.
been insane. Yeah.
And then as usual, I have to shout him out. Midfield ball, Matt Rowell. He's just he might not be winning games off of his own boot, but he's very strong with the ball. He definitely got tagged this week because his efficiency was very low. But 24 touches, 11 contested possessions, 4 inside 50, 7 clearances, 6 score involvements, 8 tackles, 38 pressure acts, and a behind.
Yeah. No, honestly, I don't want to say he gets let down by a bit of his teams, but I think it's definitely taken that distribution role this year. Like he's looking to feed off to some of the other young players,
Yeah,
like
it's like
Noah Anderson and
the job we were literally just talking about with Merritt. It's kind of a very similar position.
yeah. Uh I'll say it's a bit different because Merritt's in charge of more direct attacks where Matt Rao's looking a bit more sideways.
Mm.
But you know what I mean? As I said, I think in terms of like structural positioning, I don't think the other Gold Coast players are quite that there to make those link up chains by handball and have them be very effective.
Yeah,
Because he's getting them to players. It's just they're not
they're
doing
not
that much with them, or they're not creating enough space.
they're not
Um,
converting, stuff like that.
yeah, so it's like, as I said, if you handball to a player, but they haven't broken free enough or like, get tackled, it just lowers your disposal efficiency that way. But
Mm.
yeah, no, so as I said, very good player. It's just I think his numbers aren't quite as good as how his actual effort has been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Like that's where the stats can lie to you, as we talked about before. Is that if your
yeah,
efficiency
yeah,
is
yeah.
low, it doesn't really matter how high your disposal count or contested ball count is.
Mm,
And then just to round it off, a couple of injuries to Gold Coast. Sam Day with a foot injury. I don't know how bad it was, and then I think he might be only be out for like a couple of weeks. Could be syndesmosis.
They
I
need him
don't
back.
know for certain. They definitely need him back.
He's been absolutely fantastic since he's back.
And then Took Miller did a wrist injury. Very unlucky because it was pretty innocuous. So he'll be out for a little bit, which hopefully means that again, sometimes when one of their midfield boys goes down, others step up when they're a bit quiet. So hopefully Anderson and Ainsworth and Flanders are able to kind of fill that sort of role. Well, because Miller and Witts are their captains, and both of them are currently out. So they definitely need I dedefinitely believe it's their leadership that definitely helps them when they step up.
Yeah.
But without both of them out, it's going to be interesting.
And we've talked about it, like, even with the possession dominance, they still had a good chance of winning. They won the inside 50 count. Like, I think it's amazing. Like, I think they were the second highest inside 50s for the round. I'm going to double check that.
That sounds right, actually.
Yeah, they had 62 inside 50s, one behind Geelong. He had 63, and their, what was it, like 120, 110 to 59 scoreline. So, you know what I mean? Like, props to North Melbourne. Like, as I said, like, that rabble defense at the start of the year
has turned
63.
And has been able to defend some pretty decent players.
Yeah, like 63 to 83 is a terrible conversion rate. So they stood up there. But at the same time, the onus is on Gold Coast for, as I said, not being able to make the most of theirs. And, at the same time, when you muck around with it, one of the best ways for North Melbourne has been scoring off turnovers. I know they concede a lot themselves. But, when they can get that easy ball, get a bit of ball forward movement, they've been a bit better. So, they scored 8-4 off turnover, and as I said, when you're mucking around with the ball, it's no surprise that you can get such nice looks going the other way. And even like the stoppage work, as I said, in terms of scoring off turn, I've been a bit critical. It wasn't that great today. It was 4-5, but, a lot of that was conversion. So they're still generating a bit of that forward. Hopefully it evens out because, as I said, with how good their midfield is, they should hopefully eventually get a bit more scoring conversion out of it. Because, as I said, that probably should have really separated North. Like, they deserve to have a bigger win in this game. But I also think that's like just a reflection of North at the moment.
I think they'll just take the 4 points and appreciate how far they've come from where they were at the start of the season. Whereas for Gold Coast, this should have been the game to win if they were going to win away from home, and they didn't. So how that's going to look for the last couple of rounds coming up, going into finals, are they going to make it or are they not?
Oh man, next week's the biggest. They have to win against Port, who they haven't historically done well with. Head to head, they've only won once against them, and that was the Westhoff missed after the siren. So
that wasn't even on Gold Coast to win. That was, but a
different time, different era of football. But as I said, if we're going to talk about streaks, as I said, it's got an even longer streak going on.
Yeah, that's a pretty damning streak. So I guess that's something for us to talk about.
Yeah, I'll talk about it a bit more when we talk about the head-to-head matchup, but it makes this game a must-win.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
For them to be any consideration.
All right, I believe that will do it for the North Melbourne Gold Coast game. You've got the next one, so shall we keep going?
Yeah, we'll just briefly mention the Port Western Bulldogs game. Obviously, we're going to be talking about a bit of a mini redemption arc from such an ugly win last week against the Saints. Both teams would sort of find a nice match next week. Port would have absolutely no troubles playing clean offensive footballs against the Dogs, which pretty much disappointingly proved that if you're smart enough with possession against them, it just stifles their offensive prowess as they just struggle to generate their own intercepts and can't hit the ball from back half. Mentioned a lot of times before. Um, you know, dubbed a world record performance by Anthony Hudson. Connor Rosie absolutely destroyed the Dogs in the first quarter with an insane 19 touches.
In a
And Zach
quarter?
Butters in a quarter, yeah.
That's got to be a
Um,
world record somewhere, or at least
no, it's not a world record.
close.
I think it's 21, but it's definitely the highest this year. Um, it was just a slip of the tongue. He meant to say a team record performance. That got a bit of a slip, but I just thought it was funny. Anthony Hudson played it off, and it was one of the more enjoyable bits of commentary for the first quarter, especially for Ports fans. Um, but yeah, so Zach Butters also got 14 in a goal, and that just sort of summed up. Bulldogs only had 2 points in the first half first quarter, I should say, to Ports 5-2, and nothing right would pretty much happen from there. Absolutely smashed in the middle early on, and to make things worse, Aaron Norton, another concussion to the young. Aaron Norton suffered another concussion from an errant but incidental hit off the ball. Then later followed in the next quarter to concussion to young defender O'Donnell,
Hmm.
making the Doggies already struggling defense even thinner. And their forward line, also struggled because of these two things. Poor Lob, I think he tried hard all game, but he just had to dance between the arcs because, as I said, Norton goes down, he gets pushed forward a bit. O'Donnell goes down, he
Yes,
gets
go
pushed
back to the
back.
back
So,
line.
honestly, like, he's had a lot of effort criticized this year, but for what he had to do, like, I'll give him a pass for this game. He still tried to get into it, but didn't really have that much of a factor. Didn't kick any goals, but was okay defensively.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, as I said, they just could get nothing. They had no majors kick from traditional forwards. Depending if you want to call Bont a traditional forward, I guess. But yeah, it was only 9 set shots to 23 and 7 inside 50 marks to 18. Most of them coming from junk time. Yeah, Bulldogs middle was just okay. Um, they had a few clearances, but all of it was very controlled by Port Adelaide. Rosie ended up with 36 disposals by the end of the match, with 14 contested possessions and 11 ground ball gets,
Hmm.
7 clearances, 1 goal, 2, and 7 score involvements. So not as ridiculous as it was looking to be at the start of the game, but still a very good effort.
Whilst we're still on Rosie, actually, I did find the highest disposal. Well, as of at least a year ago, thank you to the r/AFL subreddit. Jarrett McVeigh had a 20 disposal quarter against Carlton in the 2013 semi-final,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know
So
if
I think
there's
that's
anything
one
higher
more.
since.
Oh, they mentioned it. I think they said like a 22 one by some old Geelong player. Um, but I was listening on the bus, so I couldn't quite hear it.
Okay. Well, that's
So
fair
apologies
enough.
for that.
But yeah, the best I can find is from 2013.
Yeah, as I said, by memory, I remembered it being around 22. But obviously, um, yeah, as I said, it just doesn't happen that often. Um, honestly, like it's like that quarter was pretty much a game that most players would be okay with.
Yeah, that's very true.
So yeah,
All right.
Butters might have actually been better in terms of the whole night. He had 33 disposals, 10 marks, 8 score involvements, and 2 goals from just 65% time on ground. As Ken Hinkley, I don't blame him for this. He subbed off Butters because tempers were flaring a bit. There was a lot of cheap hits off the ball.
Hmm.
And as you know, Zach Butters, his you know, he's got a bit of a slippery wallet at the moment because he's losing a lot
An interesting
in
way to put it.
fines. Yeah, well, as I said, as I said, Hinkley, he didn't want the hot hand with the hot head to go bankrupt. So he did the right thing, put him off the ground. It's a bit of a shame that he needs his head pulled in at times, but you know what I mean? It's just like, he's one of those players that, as a coach, it's just like hard because you always want him to play with that energy. You just don't
Yeah,
want him to do
because he's
things
a
which,
huge player with a huge amount of skill and talent, but he's just a little
yeah.
hot-headed.
Yeah, as I said, he's not quite Toby Green territory, but he's heading there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. So a bit of a funny moment there. I think Hinkley did probably the best thing. Bergman, I want to give a shout out because especially early on, he set the tone in the first quarter. He was matched up against Eagle Hagen. Thoroughly impressive, near best on ground, in my opinion. I know how good Butters and Rosie was, but I think this was like, yeah, it just prevented the Bulldogs from getting anything going. He had 18 disposals at 83% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, and still 4 score involvement. So it wasn't just his backline work. Did hold that ball when moving the ball well. And Ugo Hagen stuck with just 7 possessions and a behind for the game. So absolutely shut out. Evans continued to impress the young kid for Port. I think that's partially why they're defensively gelling a bit more. Georgie kicked 5, but he's now suspended as he got suckered into a few of the cheap shots going around.
Yep.
Hit on Caulfield should probably stand. I don't think they might challenge it, but it will stay, in my opinion. And yeah, as I said, Port just proved again, more often than not, if you give them time and space with the ball, they'll like easily destroy any given team. And while it's like true for most clubs, there's like a certain ruthlessness that happens when Port do it. Again, up against a team with low pressure. Flip side of that is there's not that much pressure you have to apply for it to crumble apart a bit. But, you know, when it's not there, they just go hard at it. The Bulldogs are tackling hard, but we're sort of like letting themselves down by the lack of applied pressure elsewhere, as Port Adelaide were just able to hand the ball too often to a free player around the ground to really ever think they were in any trouble with a chain of possession. And it just sort of ended up dominating. Like, this was a really comprehensive victory. As I said, a lot of the Bulldogs, like, it wasn't even close, but like the only reason they scored above 30 was due to junk time. So yeah, as I said, it was just a real non-effort by them. Very disappointing considering that they're still in finals contention, but just looks a bit shakier and shakier as the weeks go past. And yeah, it's just a win that Port Adelaide needed. I don't think it overly changes things in terms of like, yeah, I think optics in terms of where Port are as a side. I think these results can still happen, and you can still be a bit skeptical on like if Hinkley can provide the necessary game plan when things aren't going that way. But you know, as I said, there's a reason why he's never won less than 10 games in a season. Is a double-digit coach for a reason, you know? Like, he can get them playing some pretty good football, and he can get their form around in a very short amount of time. So I always give him credit for that. I still think there should be a coaching change at the end of the year, but I am very happy the way that Hinkley is able to get this team going at times. And yeah, it was just a fantastic performance to watch after a pretty miserable last month, really. So
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, that's about it. Yeah, I think like the best for the Bulldogs were like, you know, your standard English law, even maybe Liberatore. You know, he was good, but gave away a few frees at times. But yeah, even out of both these three, I think Trelaw was the only one like consistently both trying and providing positive impact. It was just really not much of an effort from many of the Bulldogs. So yeah, they'll have to lick their wounds and try again for next week.
Yeah. Well,
not sure who they're up against, but
we'll look at that a little bit later. Yeah,
yeah,
like
exactly.
there's quite a few teams this season that seem to have a very inconsistent. Just all around. Like, again, we like, as we've seen, like, you can beat any team on any given day. That's just the nature of the game.
Pretty much.
But there are some teams, your Port Adelaide, your Western Bulldogs, your St Kildas, your Fremantles. They're probably the key ones because they're like sort of in like middle. I would say, quote unquote, middle of the pack. St Kilda has dropped off a little bit, but like they're the teams that you can't always seem to want to bank on, even if they do seem to be in a good train of form.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, or at least have like very obvious flaws. I will say I put Bulldogs in a different tier, and it's not like a tier based on like anything form, but like it's like control teams, and it's like Western Bulldogs the Brisbane Lions,
Yep.
Essendon, Port are like a half breed. Like they do have some decent movement from half back, but more often than not, they want to win the possession to win the game. Collingwood, I'll also put in there. But I think Western Bulldogs are like the clearest if things aren't going their way in terms of possession. They're just,
It kind of just
I don't want to
crumbles.
say hopeless, but yeah, they are way off the pace. Like, we've even seen Brisbane this year, like a performance against Melbourne, where they weren't playing very well for a majority of that game, but were able to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, Essendon, I'll say they're the most consistent team of the controlling. They've done a lot to patch up, but you know what I mean? Is like they don't, as I said, they sort of, they can still get beaten, and they have been beaten a couple of times very comprehensively, again by Port and the other team that flogged them. I'm forgetting now.
Yeah, I'm blanking at the moment too.
Yeah, they had another flogging, but so
Yeah, no, I get what you
as I
mean.
said, like the Bulldogs are clearly like the worst tier, and it is an arbitrary tier. I'm not saying that you need to be, it's not even like, it's just the styles. If you group styles, the Western Bulldogs are probably the worst. Unless you count the Kangaroos as a control team, which I don't know, maybe you could, but I mean, they're just a bit, they don't really have enough identity at the moment for me to really do that.
Bottom three, we probably don't really need to talk about in terms of where they really sit because there's just issues all over the park.
Exactly. So, of all the contenders, we'll just put it. So,
yeah. I believe that's it for that game. So, shall we move on to Goomba Stadium, as you like to put it?
Goomba, yes, I love good Goomba.
So, Geelong hosted the Hawks down in Geelong. Scoreline was 16-14, 110 to 9-5-59. Pretty convincing win from Geelong. They put their foot down fairly early, and the Hawks just couldn't find the right gear to be able to catch up. For example, Jeremy Cameron, in the first 10 minutes alone, he kicked 3 behinds. Should have been 3 goals, but like they pretty much Geelong's midfield was already in stunning form right off the bat. Zero issues. Hawks were really struggling to contain them. There was a little bit of fight back in the second, but they just couldn't keep up. Geelong were just too good. And I want to start with Jack Bowes. I've talked about him a couple of times in the Geelong games. I think he's really stepped up past couple of weeks. 24 touches, 12 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 5 score involvements, 4 tackles, and 21 pressure acts. Been really strong on ball. I think some teams have noticed that he is like a really key mover of the ball in their midfield, so I think they've started tagging him as well. But compared to what they were doing to Tom Stewart, and then he started to drop off in form a little bit. Speaking of Tom Stewart, he got moved to the midfield this week, and he looked pretty good. It was a pretty interesting move. He's known mostly as a key interceptor. Has always been very good at that key intercepting role. And
I mean, he still was this match.
Yeah, but he
was intercepting in a different area. So
he was just playing more up the ground, and it seemed to suit him quite well.
With 4 other players.
Yeah. But he finished with 26 touches, 9 contested possessions, 8 intercepts, 11 marks, 10 score involvements, 18 pressure acts, and 2 behinds off his own boot. It's unfortunate that he couldn't really actually convert them into goals, because that would have been kind of like he probably would have been best on ground if that happened.
It was a comeback round. It was a comeback game, and I can understand why you might want 2 goals on top, but it was still a very impressive effort.
Absolutely. And then Jeremy Cameron, I do want to go back to him. He's looking a lot better. Has come up the ground a lot more, as we've talked about kind of all season long, which is really interesting because he had 485 meters gained. So he definitely ran a lot further up the ground and still managed to convert, getting 4-4 from 19 touches, 5 contested possessions, 8 marks, 4 inside 50s, 13 score involvements overall, and 3 1%ers. Him combined with Shannon Neal, who's looking better and better as the weeks go on, now that he's actually getting a lot of decent game time. I think
Yeah.
they still have a pretty damaging forward line. I know Brad Close also had a really great game as well.
Oh yeah. Him and Cameron combined with 20 overall, so
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
7
It
score
was
involvements from him. 20
stacked.
score involvements, I
Yeah,
should say.
20. Yeah, it was actually really, really stacked performance from both of
I
them.
mean, that's more than some teams probably put out for the game.
Yeah, it's pretty
Probably West
true.
Coast.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about some of the other teams in terms of that
Mm.
statistic. But yeah, I think Geelong are looking really, really good. Definitely still trying to vie for a top 8 position. Whether they'll be able to, I know their run home is pretty hit and miss. Um, but I think they definitely are in decent contention. It's just whether they're able to kind of keep this sort of form going for the next couple of weeks.
It's just like, it's just so hard when you were so bad and it seems like you flipped again. And obviously the biggest thing is like, defensively, they stood up, despite making that move. Because I mean, we mentioned before, we wanted to see something happen with Tom Stewart, and we weren't exactly sure what it was. We don't know if he's going to stay in the midfield. But this is just like, to me, being proactive. We're not just going to repeat the same moves over and over. Like, we're going to always be continuing to improve. You never rule us out.
Yeah, it's
And it's just what
the
well-coached
move
teams do.
moving Stewart into the midfield definitely was more proactive than reactive. It was reactive, he would have started off half back and then they would have moved him in. But I think
Yeah,
starting him
exactly.
straight away in the midfield just to give them a different look definitely works a lot better for them.
Yeah. I mean, and it's brave too, because Hawthorn weren't bad form coming into this. Like,
No, Hawks were on a
this could have
decent
been
win
like
streak. They were
another
still in strong
loss.
form.
Yeah. And this could have been like another loss at Goomba for Geelong, who have dropped games here.
Well, I don't think it
But
was.
like,
I'll be honest. I don't think it was ever going to happen because of Sicily being out.
no, but like,
Sicily to Hawthorn is what Jake Lever is to Melbourne. He's that
but you know
important to
what
the
I mean?
back
It's
line.
just,
But yeah, Geelong could have
yeah,
dropped this
it's
game as
just more
well.
like coaching mindset,
Yeah.
Like, you can't ever afford not to be brave as a coach. You can be wrong sometimes.
You can certainly
and,
take risks,
not,
and risks could be bad,
yeah,
but
exactly.
nothing wrong with taking a risk.
Yeah, as long as it's obviously thought through. Like, you could see the advantages of doing that. So yeah, no, as I said, good proactive move. Yeah, as I said, uh,
Yeah, I
what did I say? I don't know.
I get it.
Lost
It's
that train
like
of thought, but
Stewart
yeah.
to the midfield, brilliant move, good risk. Did it
Yeah,
at the right
exactly.
time, especially with Sicily out to really like not be the glue to keep the Hawthorn backline together. However, I do think there were some Hawks players that did have pretty solid games. James Warple being one of them. 26 touches, 16 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 4 score involvements, 7 tackles, and 26 pressure acts. Strong on ball, just couldn't weren't able to get enough conversion into the forward line. Dylan Moore also kind of did a lot of the same. 26 touches, 6 contested possessions, 7 inside 50s, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, 15 pressure acts, 2-1 scoreline of his own, and 559 meters gained, which was, I believe, highest for the game off the top of my head.
Yeah.
If not, it was at least top 3.
No, that is right.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I thought, Sicily being out definitely doesn't help their backline. Granted, it was the same dislocated shoulder he had back in round 8, and he only missed 2 weeks then. So I think he might only miss 2 weeks, being the week just gone, and this week coming up. So he should be back for at least the last month of footy. If not, it might be a little bit longer. I haven't actually checked the timeline on that. But unlucky to Mitch Lewis, who just came back from injury, got a nasty head knock, and somehow did his ACL at the same time. It's all not looking good for Mitch Lewis.
No, I think, yeah, it's ACL reconstruction, so he'll need surgery. So he'll out for the rest of the season.
And probably half,
unfortunately,
at least
I'm not
5-6
sure,
rounds the next season as well.
because as I said, it doesn't say that his ACL snapped. It just require surgery. So I'm not sure.
It's
Like, exactly, but it's a significant time.
it is yeah, it is a very, very rough go at it. Because he had just come back from a key injury. I think it was an ACL,
Yeah.
in fact. And he just,
Yeah, I think so.
and just ruptured it again. That's just very unlucky for him.
Yeah.
Especially because they haven't exactly needed him because they've been winning a lot of games and been in some pretty good form. But he is such a strong player.
Another forward option would be nice. Like,
Yeah.
and not. I'd say it's due to their bold movement. Actually, that's been one of the reasons why they've been able to score so well.
And
Like
again,
some of the
and when they got Will Day back, that looks so much better. Like
yeah, exactly.
they were still winning without him, but it wasn't as consistent
Mm.
of ball movement through the midfield until Day came back.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, that's not even why they lost this game. Like,
No,
this game was
Geelong
just like an
outplayed
insane
them like pretty
forward
much all over the
pressure
ground.
from Geelong. And as you mentioned, when you lose someone like Sicily, like with a young team, like obviously, I think a lot of I mean, I didn't watch it, of course, but you know, sometimes when that happens, it's just that leadership as well made it a bit harder for them to get that ball from outside 50s into some of their better middle distributors. So, yeah, as I said, Geelong were just able to turn the ball over and feast for most of it.
Pretty much.
There is some player I want to mention, just because I thought it was very interesting him coming back. Shane Munner, the Irishman.
Ah, yes.
I think this is first game back from injury from a long time. Stat-wise, he was good. Someone else who's a Geelong supporter, thought he had a fantastic game. But 14 tackles.
Shout out to Echo.
And 20 possessions. Playing on the wing, I think is sort of what they wanted because they've been persisting with, what's the other Irishman's name for most of the year?
Oyster Mullen?
Ocean Mullen. And he hasn't quite been that person. And I think, Sean Manor, because he had a pretty solid first couple of games too. He might be that player, so keep an eye out for him the next few games because he might be a player to watch. He's definitely, I think, had a pretty fast start to the league. So hopefully he'll continue that. I'm pretty sure he's mature Irish recruit.
I believe he's like mid-20s off the top of my head.
Yeah, so ready-made body. He can run the whole game, so
yeah, definitely one to look forward to in the next couple of years as Geelong keeps trying to vie for top spot.
Just keep on plucking players out of everywhere. One of the best. Honestly, for
you just gotta hope that Geelong don't do what some other teams have done, where they've just tried to stay competitive and it hasn't worked out. Richmond.
I think it's a bit different. I think Geelong's been smart about it.
They have.
And plus, they've had some of the best trades. Like, as you mentioned, taking on Bo's contract, is one thing, but also having a team that's competitive, that, is still on the cheap.
And not to mention, they got Jeremy Cameron at probably the best time.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, so they and they've also got Tyson Stengel, who they just re-signed. We spoke about that last week. They've got a ton of good pickups from other teams. They've gone in really well into the draft.
Yeah, and it's also a testament to their conditioning coaches as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeremy Cameron could have been like a 1-year foot injury and then done basically nothing. Whereas now, like, you could argue some of his best years he probably has.
Well, I mean, he won a premiership at Geelong, so clearly one of them is at Geelong.
Yeah, well, as I said, like, I don't exactly know how his production from GWS, because he was quite good. Like, it's easy to forget.
Yeah, he was their best forward 2019. So there was definitely like something very important there.
So, yeah, as I said, I don't know exactly how his best year from 2019 stacks with the others, but I would say in terms of importance and in terms of mesh as well with other forwards, like, as I said, distribution level is off the chart with Jeremy Cameron in his twilight years.
Absolutely. All right, you have the second last Saturday game, so if you want to run through it.
An absolute thriller, yeah. So this was a very interesting game. It was, in a way, very eerily similar to the Friday night game. Carlton would start off raging hot, in transition, only to be dismantled by a very hardworking GWS core midfield, as defense sort of took a sideline in this very high accuracy, wavy momentum filled game. Early on, Zach Williams and Harry McKay looked to take the game off their own hands, both scoring 3 goals in the first quarter, as Carlton just sort of scored at will from stoppages. Cripps and Tom de Koning imposed themselves early and would be GWS's biggest roadblocks for the night. But yeah, after that 8-goal first quarter and getting a 39-point lead, they would be restricted massively to just 3 goals in quarters 2 and 3 as a light injury. I don't know if he'll miss weeks, but he came back on afterwards. So, but he definitely played a bit hampered to Jacob Wiedering, would sort of signal a bit of a defensive collapse as GWS would kick 17-6 at the end of the third quarter, with Hogan getting 6 marks inside 50s and 5 goals as he returned to early season form. GWS would dominate the forward 50 play, as Carlton were really just a few good waves of halfback movement in the first and last quarter. They did stem the flow a bit and mounted a comeback late, restricting GWS to 1 goal in the last quarter to their 5, with McKay ending up with 5 goals in total. But yeah, as I said, it wasn't enough. They fell short, 18-8, 116 to 16-8, 104. Another game where both teams score over 100. There's been a bit more of that this year, which is always nice to see. But yeah, much like Essendon's game, Carlton had some like the Collingwood game in the Essendon one, Carlton had some big performances, but was really dropped off after Cripps and de Koning, while GWS had a slew of solid efforts, with the most encouraged of them being by their young kids, which I'll highlight first, because, normally we lead with the big disposal getters, but I want to highlight the kids because they all play pretty well. Darcy Jones in the forward pocket was the best of them. He was directing play, much like his captain Toby Greenwood. He had 7 score involvements, 2 direct goal assists, and scored 1 goal, 1. Their debutant, Joe Fonte, looked very nice off halfback, and he wasn't afraid to press up and get the ball moving inside 50. And Rising Star winner a few weeks ago, Harvey Thomas, continued to be a very handy forward option. Up forward, he had 6 tackles and 6 score involvements and a goal. So overall, like, for a very young side, I think they said they had 8 players under 50 games or something like that.
That sounds about right off the top of my head. I know they're a very, very young side.
A very young side coming off some pretty bad form. So, yeah, pretty good to see. The main winners of the night were veterans, obviously, as well. Jesse Hogan, I already mentioned, he kicked 5. Jack Buckley, and, of course, the man without age, Callum Ward. How amazing has he been for GWS?
Winding back the clock yet again.
We've been saying it every week. Unfortunately, I've made this segue badly because to start off with Buckley, he absolutely cream corn, right? He restricted him to 1 goal, 2, and very little possessions, whilst the Ward of the wing, such an offensive threat, while still being able to run back. He doesn't let his opponents do what he wants. He's out running both ways. He racked 30 possessions, 12 contested at 80% efficiency.
Very good.
Took 8 marks, 5 intercepts, kicked 2 goals, and was involved in 6 score involvements. Running it out for GWS, Briggs, Canelio, Callanan, and Green. That's Tom Green were impressive in their attack from stoppage, with 32 score involvement coming from that quartet. So that's 9 score involvements each. So GWS were scoring dominantly out of stoppages. Green and Briggs were doing more of the grunt work, feeding off to Canelio and Canahan. Toby Bedford continued. He shut down Walsh a bit in the first half and, still was able to contribute offensively. And then he had the nigh impossible task of tagging a ruthless Patrick Crisp. Cripps. Yeah, as honestly, he would have one of the matches around still, despite being in the losing side. 33 possessions, 21 contested at 82% efficiency, 11 clearances, 10 ground ball gets, 20 pressure acts, 9 scoring involvements, 2 goals, and a massive 2 hit-outs, making him Carlton's second best ruckman for the night.
I hate to say it. Oh, actually, I don't hate to say it because it'd be good to say it. But I think he would still actually get the 3 votes, despite losing. Like, he just put up a monster performance in a losing game.
It was really good. And, like, honestly, I mean, Tom de Koning, in terms of impact, wasn't that far behind. Like, he had 24 disposals, 16 contested, 11 clearances, 5 tackles, 8 ground ball gets, and 8 score involvements.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can mention, the reason why Cripps was the second best ruckman was because Tom de Koning was able to take so much of the load, as he has been all year.
He's been very, very solid as a solo ruck. It's been very, very good to see for his development.
Because, the only other person to get a hit out for Carlton was Harry Mackay in the forward line with 1, half of what Cripps was able to produce. But as I said, 19 for Tom de Koning, but raw hit out numbers isn't his thing. But on the flip side, Kieran Briggs with 40 hit outs. Absolutely massive game. 10 clearances, 16 contested possessions. It was really a statement game for both of them. We've had a lot of contests this year where it's like the 2 different opposing rucks, they don't really nullify each other that much.
It's in some cases they kind of complement each other, but they kind of complement each other and dominate their own way.
Yeah, like Briggs was able to get the ball to the players. Like Carlton still won the clearances. I don't think they won center clearances. I think they were slightly beaten out in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, it was just 2 different styles of ruckman. Just sort of, it's like when you have 2 gun midfielders that don't really play defensively, and they just rack up disposals next to each other. It was just both of them got to do what they want in their areas of the ground, and both teams benefited from it. As I said, it's just the Giants had a slew of performers that were performing well, and Carlton just sort of, as I said, they just had players that were okay, but it was definitely not a as consistent as their games have been the last month or so. And it was sort of an old ghost coming back to haunt them, I thought, in prime time after solid weeks of looking flawless, is that they can have a lot of goals kicked against them quickly, as they are the second worst team behind West Coast, defending scores from stoppages. It's their biggest flaw in a very well-rounded team. I mentioned, that winning by disposal dominance teams. I don't actually know if I said Carlton in there, but they're one of them as well. Which sort of just goes to show, like, one way to approach Carlton is you just got to sort of accept the shootout.
Yeah.
Their score forward line is so scary, as you can still get points going the other way quite easily against them. As I said, GWS just had a range of more contributors, which allowed their movement to be a bit better. They've been lacking the last few weeks. It was just, but as I said, like, despite a massive performance by Buckley, I don't think GWS can even say, like, their defense was very sound. But it was just their effort up the field. We're minimizing the inside 50s. They had that scoring advantage from winning the contest so much, and that just kept the gap for most of the night after the first quarter. And as I said, very important win. And also I want to say as well, although Carlton had some chains of half back, they were very consistent with them. They had some nice entries. But as I said, they weren't quite consistent enough at getting the forward half intercepts, which GWS were able to wing. And as I said, their halfbacks and wings just struggled this match. It's sort of like the form they were when they were, like, injured to buggery. I think Ahmed Saad had a very quiet game. Jordan Boyd didn't actually distribute. He was more defensive.
Maybe he should have just taken the week off.
Yeah, maybe. But as I said, they were just struggling. I mean, even someone like Akers has been pretty solid this week. Didn't really play that, or like a lot of his best efforts were in the first quarter.
Yeah.
So it was really only their midfield in terms of ball movement this week, which is a bit of a shame. And yeah, as I said, hopefully, I think they're going to have their fingers crossed that both Wiedering and Mitch McGovern got like knocks. They were able to come back. They still play a lot of game. Wiedering still play 87% of the game. Mitch McGovern played 79. So hopefully they both come out clean. Yeah, but as I said, I think this will just be a blip for Carlton. They're still scoring at a rate of knots like they normally do.
Absolutely.
I think the biggest thing was just like how much more impressive GWS looked this week. They had ball movement again. The Orange Tsunami had a few graphics of that come back on. Had a bit of orange Gatorade fill the screen up in the Fox Footy department. So glad to see they can get a bit creative with that again.
Also,
and yeah,
speaking of, I want to shout out their social media department because they are always on point with their work. Yeah. It is always fun to see what they come up with.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, I thought there was like another segue to something specific, but yeah, I agree. They are fantastic. A lot of good banter from them, but you know, as I said, they normally keep it fairly, what do you call it? Non-personal.
Yeah.
So, except with Mason Cox, which they really don't like. But
I don't blame them. To be fair, I don't blame them.
Yeah, I know. I mean, look, it was a bit of storm in a teacup, but I think both teams have moved on from that. But yeah, as I said, just generating a nice few rivalries with teams. I don't think this is like a rivalry, but there's been some pretty good games between GWS and Carlton, and I think this is a very enjoyable.
It's not necessarily a rivalry, but it's like two teams that just really enjoy going against each other.
Yeah, I'd say that 100%. So yeah, that was fantastic game to watch, and you know, I think Carlton will be slightly disappointed, but like this is just, you know, as I said, like we've had a discussion. I don't believe in needing to lose games. But, you know, there's no doubt that when you're like winning for so long, sometimes it's harder to keep yourself reminding to do some of the small things, or like reminding yourself that there are weaknesses in your games when they're not being exposed as much.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this just highlighted areas where Carlton need to improve. But yeah, as I said, nothing alarm bells. It's just they got exploited by, you know, a fairly accurate Greater Western Sydney side. Yes. Yeah.
It's okay. I get it. There are two Western teams. Actually, there are three Western teams. Actually, there are five Western teams. But
yeah, I know.
The wording can be hard.
Yeah, I've been a bit off the pace. I think I've been spending my words before I've collected them. You know, sometimes you gotta.
Yeah. No, I do that. I do that a lot. The point of view about needing to lose games, I'm on the opposite end, but not for the reason of that they need to lose them. It's more of that, like you said, like if you're winning so much, you can't see the flaws in your game plan and where you need to fix your weaknesses. And like it doesn't need to be a big loss to be able to see, like, to find where those are, but like it can just be like a 5-point margin, for example. It could be something very tiny.
Yeah,
but it's as long as it's it's a better indicator to show you, or like a close win or any sort of loss, pretty much is a better indicator rather than a massive margin win, to be able to show you where your weaknesses are and what you can fill.
I think like the difference in terms of like philosophy, because like, well, we both say they sort of sound the same, but like honestly, I believe like there's not like teams go out and like have these performances and they're like, oh, they don't have enough effort in this area this game, where it's like, no, it's been happening a lot. It's just like, as I said, I think
teams just haven't like exploited it as much.
In an 18-team competition where there's so much competitive enough, like it's just eventually you're gonna come through a team that's rolled the dice, they're playing well, and like things are clicking for them, you know, and they've just been able to beat you in that area. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, there's not that much difference between, like, in the weeks. So it's not like they're getting more casual or anything. I think, as I said, it just things get highlighted very easier. Sorry, not that, like, um, I think people just forget, like, you can be a good team and still have weaknesses.
Yeah.
Like, as I said, like, we talk about Sydney being invincible. Like, there are areas that you can see where you can attack them, but it's just very hard to do. Like, and we're going to talk about it later, but even this is like, what? It's 116 to 104. It's not like a massive win
No.
by GWS. So, you know what I mean? So, as I said, I don't think, in terms of, like, do you need this loss? I don't think so. Like, I don't think any team needs a loss, but you're right. Like, it does make coaching a bit easier.
You learn more from your
And you can
losses
say,
than your
this
wins.
didn't work. We actually lost,
Yeah.
So,
And, like, granted, GWS absolutely can learn a lot from this game as well, even because it was still close, especially from that first quarter. Like, yeah, they managed to fix whatever issues they had in that first quarter for the rest of the game, and it worked out brilliant for them. But yeah, like, it's always better to learn things from close games or a massive losing margin rather than a massive winning margin.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I said, like, I mean, obviously, massive losing margin. There's a point where it doesn't matter, but
yeah,
obviously, something has to go pretty wrong, for that to happen. So,
and like half the time that if it's a massive losing margin, that might not just be you. That might just be the other team being absolutely dominant. Like sometimes that just happens.
But yeah, as I said, I mean, we've seen it like Essendon when they first bought Adelaide, or I mean, hell, even the Western Bulldogs first bought Adelaide. I don't know why I'm bringing up Port games, probably because they're the ones that your own team, you remember the floggings a bit more than a week by week. But you know what I mean? Like, yeah, the Bulldogs obviously had an avenue where they were weak, and Port just exploited it. And as I said, there wouldn't be much difference between a 50 and an 80-point margin in that game. But yeah, as I said, the main point is just that the Bulldogs had some key issues. And yeah, that's what you take away, that sort of big loss.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, let's move on to the final Saturday game, Saturday night over at Optus Stadium. Fremantle taking on Richmond. Yeah, it was a game. 69-105 to 7-12-54 was the scoreline. Freo put us into 18th, as whilst they're trying to solidify a top 4 spot. North Melbourne winning also kind of did that because we had to win this game to try and stay.
I was going to say, I thought that
bottom.
Dimma Hardwick personally shifted the.
It was very much an indirect movement by him. And just before I rattle through like some of the key players and stuff from this game, being for the first time since the 18 team competition has started, we're on the bottom. So it's what, 10, 12 something years, something like that.
12 teams, 12 years with a full 18 competition.
Which is
11.
11?
2013.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah, that's right. Because we definitely have a couple of wooden spoons of our own back in years prior. It's the first time in a long time that we've been 18th, and honestly, I would be okay if we stayed here for the rest of the season. Do I expect it to actually happen? 50-50. Again, we play North in a couple of weeks, for example. We play St.Kilda again in a couple. We play St.Kilda again. We play Gold Coast again. There's a couple of very much winnable games for us in our last couple of rounds. But even if we do end up getting the wooden spoon, I'm not going to say no to a number 1 draft pick, especially if we're going to trade away a couple of players and get some other first round picks. That's a pretty good draft hand in my book, especially when we've kind of pissed away a couple of our draft hands getting Taranto and Hopper and players like that over the past couple of years.
I wouldn't quite say pissed away, because I think
we still have picked up some pretty decent players out of the draft. Like, I'm not doubting that, but we definitely could have gone into the draft with a faster rebuild plan than what we currently have.
I don't know. I'd still rather be in the Richmonds where they've got structure throughout. But yeah, as I said, they are. I mean, it's just a fact that they're going to lose a bit of spine. They're going to have to inject it with a bit of youth. So you know, it's not so much having the number one as in like the difference between number one and number two. It's just like the flexibility
Oh yeah, you
for the
look at the
player they
look
get
at
to
how many
pick.
players we've recruited who've come from like pick 40 and below is kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
exactly. And like there's a slew of, I said everyone gets excited about the number one pick, but like, people, there's been plenty, like even in the league at the moment, like Aaron Cadman, no one really gets that excited about him. Or there's another one that I've
Cadman,
forgotten.
Rayner,
Yeah,
JHF,
Rayner.
Fiesel.
Oh yeah, okay, you're listing all of them.
Yeah,
I was gonna say JHF I get very excited about.
Harley Reid. There are
Yeah.
still some pretty high talent number one draft picks out there at the moment, but
Yeah, but as I
I
said,
get your
like
point.
the thing is like a number one pick is always a lot more exciting in the year you do it, and anything after that is just what happens. So
Yeah, exactly
yeah.
right. Um, going back to the game itself, I want to shout
Mm.
out Andrew Brayshaw specifically because I think he was, apart from maybe Tracy and his 5 goals, I think Brayshaw was best on ground.
Mm.
35 touches, 11 contested possessions, 8 marks, 5 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 10 score involvements, 8 tackles, 28 pressure acts, and a 1-1 scoreline off his own boot. Very, very strong on ball game. He probably ended up getting tagged in the second half, but it definitely didn't matter at all because he had such a brilliant performance. It definitely shows that Fremantle are very flexible in terms of how their midfield works, especially with
Mm.
Fife taking a little bit of a backseat from a starring role to a shutdown sort of role, and it's been very, very good for them. And you've got Young, you've got Sarong, all these other players that are able to step up when needed. It's very, very good that Freo have that flexibility to, and
Yeah.
especially like, granted, Sean Darcy going down with concussion doesn't help them ruck wise, even though Luke Jackson always looks very good and may have and probably have to step up a little bit more over the next couple of weeks anyway. Um, but if they want to 100% solidify this top four spot, making sure that that midfield keeps grinding at it and keeps working
Mm.
hard will definitely contribute to keeping that.
Yeah, and like to that point, like it's one of those things where I don't think there's actually much different win wise between like whether they play Jackson and whether they play Jackson and Darcy. Like obviously Jackson does play well as a solo rock. Um, but you know what I mean? It's just like people
Jackson's
say,
always been
oh,
more
you should.
defensive minded as well, rather than offensive minded.
Yeah, well, yeah, as I said he can stick with other ruckman a bit better, but yeah, but like the main thing is like, they're like, oh, like just invest in Jackson or whatever. But like Sean Darcy,
I
like
think
as I
giving
said, the
Darcy the
dominance.
time is much more important because it'll frees up Jackson to
Yeah,
have more roaming presence.
exactly. And as I said, and we're talking about a pretty developing young forward line here. So
Mm.
like, as I said, the next 3 years, I can't really imagine Jackson playing anywhere but forward line. Obviously Tracy has bookended his way to obviously, like, he's the best forward at the moment. And when I say second forward, I'm not saying he's the second best forward, but he's playing as a forward that can come up high and distribute the ball.
Yeah, he's not the deep
Obviously,
forward. He's the roaming
no,
forward.
that's Jai Amos. Obviously, Jai Amos hasn't converted as much this year. His form's definitely dropped off
Mm-hmm.
from his low disposal but high conversion start of the year. Um, but yeah, as I said, but the drop off from those two, like I said, you got Sam Sturt, you got Patrick Voss.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are very raw young players. So to have Luke Jackson just to provide more support there, I think is a very needed thing. Um, so yeah, as I said, so despite people might think, oh, it's a good thing Darcy, well, not a good thing
It's
Darcy
definitely
went
not a
down,
good
but it
thing,
might
but
no,
silver lining sort of
like
look out.
Luke Jackson playing good as a solo ruckman isn't necessarily going to help Freo all that much
Yeah,
because they already have a great midfield. So yeah, as I said, he played much better in the back half when he was rucking. So at least there's some excitement there for the next few weeks
yeah.
seeing him play solo.
Speaking of Luke Jackson, I do actually have him mentioned here. 21 touches, 90.5% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 9 tackles, 32 pressure acts, and 3 1%ers. Back to Tracy, he kicked 5 goals from 16 touches, 75% efficiency, 9 marks, 7 score involvements, and 16 pressure acts. But they didn't win the clearances overall. For the first time in a while, we actually won the clearances overall, and that was a massive credit to Toby Nankervis, massive captain's game, despite, the 105 to 54 deficit. He had a brilliant performance from the front. Absolutely stomped in the ruck work between both Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson. Not that I think it was ever going to be any contest. He is technically, well, according to the statistics, he is the second best ruck in the competition, Nankervis.
Yeah.
We just
I mean, you can't judge rucks.
We just don't have a midfield to work with him.
Yeah. As I said, they can be very dependent on other positions, but I can vouch that I think Nankervis has been one of the most consistent players in a struggling side.
Absolutely. So his statistics overall were 26 touches, 21 contested possessions, 36 hitouts, 11 clearances, 6 score involvements, 7 tackles, 23 pressure acts, and a 1-1 scoreline off his own boot. He was just doing it all.
Yeah.
And I love to see it. And that's why he's our captain, because he can lead from the front. Sure, he might not have, that much confidence in front of camera. So he can be a little hot-headed sometimes. Why he's called Nank the Tank. But when he's on, he can absolutely lead by example.
And
it's no different to other captains in the team. When they lift, the entire team lifts.
Yeah,
Cripps. Actually, no. Cripps is actually a very good example. Bontempelli is a good example. He was quiet in the the Doggies Port game. That's when your captain's quiet. Sometimes your team just struggles a little bit. There might be 1 or 2 players who try to lift the game up, and it just isn't as effective. But when a captain steps up, it's very noticeable. And despite the massive margin, he stepped up, and our midfield actually did get to work because, again, we beat them in the clearances, something that we never really do. And yeah, Nankervis was definitely a big part of that. I want to also talk about Ben Miller. I've talked about him over the past couple of weeks. He had a great game in defense. I believe he was initially on Amos, I think, but then he got moved to Tracy because Blight was subbed off, because they subbed him off early purely just to make sure they don't ruin his body, because it was only his second game and he was already doing a lot of hard work. So I respect that choice. You don't want to burn a young player out too early. Well, yeah, because you were talking about that with there was one of the subs that happened in one of the games we were just talking about.
Oh, with the Collingwood game, the defender.
Either that one or it was
Keane.
Yeah, that one.
Not Keane. Dean.
Yeah. Young body can play a strong, great game, but you don't want to burn them out. So that's why you just sub them out, just to try and keep their body fit. You don't want to injure them too early, especially if they're young. But yeah, Ben Miller, great game. 17 touches with 82.4% efficiency, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 11 pressure acts, 7 1%ers, which I think was the highest for the game off the top of my head, or at least top 3. And 376 meters gained. I do really, despite the losses, I do really like how our backline looks. It's just about because we're really good 1-on-1, but the issue is that we do sometimes struggle to just forget to man up, and that's how teams can get so much open space on us, and it's it happens.
Yeah, as I said, defensively, and this just has to do with a lot of in and outs. They just please.
Again, we don't really have a team. We still have too many injuries we're working with.
Yeah,
stuff like that. But if it does work out for next season, and we actually our backline at least goes somewhat injury free, I think we could have an insanely strong backline. It's just making sure that all gels together and not having any injuries.
And also, as a bit of a prelude to next game, you also want a backline that doesn't have to just defend insanely week in, week out. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I also want to be
again. Our midfield did step up this week. Not that I have any
yeah.
major notes on it,
Oh, for sure.
but yeah, we just end up getting outscored. It happens. Our forward line definitely didn't help at all. Like 7-12 isn't great, but
no. And as I said again, like some teams you get a bit worried with the amount getting scored against and score off turnovers, but for a team like Richmond, you just sort of shrug your shoulders and go, well,
yeah, like
that just
if as I said before, if we stay 18th for the rest of the season, I'm fine with that.
exactly
We're in a rebuild.
Like,
we know we're in a rebuild. We're gonna lose players.
I'm not
We're
going
gonna
to
get
say
some new
it will
players.
happen, but like I could see the Tigers getting at least nearly out the bottom four next year with the way that they're playing.
We have. I like the game plan that we have. There are some players that I definitely think either should move roles or we should get rid of. Bolton.
Yeah.
Granted, he had a great game. 4 goals, nearly broke his career high. He actually stepped up this week when he's been pretty down on form lately. Which was good to see. I still think he should be moved onto the wing or halfback, especially if we lose Rioli to Gold Coast. Even though we're saying that he's going to stay, I don't think that's going to happen. And the issue with us losing Dan Rioli is if we lose him, we'll probably lose Morris as well. Because Morris, the whole reason that Morris came to Richmond in the first place and didn't go to like Port Adelaide with Willie is because he wanted to play with Dan. So if we lose Dan Rioli, we're probably going to lose Morris as well. It's kind of unfortunate, but that's family things. I respect it.
It happens. But yeah, back to the point on Shai Bolton, I can actually understand why you want, because I've thought about this before, and Shai Bolton is really that cream on the top player.
He's very selfish at a lot of his style.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why I feel like moving him to more of a team-oriented position, halfback, whether as an interceptor because he has the leap, or on the wing as a runner, something where it can play a little bit more individualistic, but still requires a lot of team focus. And you don't always. Exactly. And something that he often does is he tries to go for the flashy plays, but that's not something that we always need him to do. As much as it's cool, and when it works, it works. You want to try and utilize his speed and agility, and he's able to break tackles as well, which is good despite being such a small body. So you want to try and utilize that more than encouraging him to take these risks that don't work out majority of the time.
Yeah, for sure. And that's sort of what I'm saying. It's like, if you are accepting that Richmond have at least 3 rebuilding years, which even that could turn around a bit more.
Even if next year we start pushing back into the middle of the pack, I'd be happy with that. Considering we're still rebuilding process.
Realistically, I think it would take at least 2, if not 3 years before I would see Richmond getting back into finals.
Absolutely. Because, you look at our list now, we're 100% going to lose players to other teams.
Yeah.
We'll lose at least maybe 2 or 3 to retirements in the next year or 2.
Of stuff that they're going to have to find players. But yeah, as I said, it's like Shai Bolton, it's not you want to trade him because he's not playing well enough. It's because
it's just looking at value in the rebuild.
Exactly.
And speaking of, him and Baker, I've been kind of looking at Freo more than West Coast.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, as I said, it's not like you want to see him go. But
no, absolutely not. If we could keep our players, I would love to.
There's definitely a mutual benefits that could come from this, and I think Shai Bolton is one of them. Yeah, honestly, I think I'd rather
if Freo want Baker and Bolton, we could 100% get a great deal for them both. If Graham wants to go to Port, because he's always been eyeing to go back home, it just hasn't. We've just wanted to keep him because he's great on baller when he's actually fit and working. And if Dan Rioli wants to actually go to Dimma and the Suns, and they're still willing to give up 2 first-rounders for him, we'll take that and run with it. We absolutely should take that if that's what's going to happen. But yeah,
it's just But at that time, you're looking to do either another trade to get a player or try and line someone up in free agency because it is a big spine.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, especially if we're going to lose possible players to retirements, like Lynch is still struggling to stay on the park. Grimes is out for the rest of the season. Prestia as well is still like
for sure.
50-50. They're the three players that I expect to possibly retire this year or next year. Grimey especially should be this year because he's not coming back this season anyway. But yeah, so if we're going to lose a bunch of, like, at least 3, maybe 4 players to either other teams, 3 players to retirement, we definitely want to try and get a player from other team back, and then the rest of it could just go into the draft.
Yeah, I'd even maybe two, like maybe like one big signing and one maybe like new home, more time in position sort of player.
And especially now that we're finally putting more time into Kaczynski as well, like we're starting to develop him a little bit more as a forward in our system, who'll be able to work well with McKelty, with Cumberland. I guess I still don't really like him. All of our other small forwards, like we've got Sonsi, we've got Ralph Smith, we've got he's a wingman, but like we've Mansell, players like that. Yeah, Seth Campbell, great shout. All of these younger players that we're just slowly building up. It's definitely going to be a super young forward line if Lynch doesn't come back, but I think it's going to be a forward line that can really gel together like Jack and the Mosquito Fleet did during the Premiership season. So, yeah. Anyway, back to the game itself. I have just a couple more things to note down, and that's the injuries. We already mentioned Sean Darcy with concussion. He'll miss only 1 game, thankfully, due to Fremantle's spanning games.
Schedule.
So he'll only miss this week coming up. He won't miss next week, week after. And then Josh Draper with a cork leg. It happens. Could be out for 1 or 2 weeks. Usually they're not too bad, but takes a bit of time to recover from them.
Bit of a shame after like a huge last week, but yeah, they've got stock down there.
I'm just grateful that we didn't suffer another injury.
Yeah,
praise be. But yeah, you've got the next games. We'll do one of yours from Sunday, and then we'll jump to me, and then we'll finish off probably with. Do you want to finish off with St Kilda City, or do you want to start with it?
Yeah, I'll finish off with St Kilda. I think we can just breeze through the West Coast, Melbourne. There's not.
There's not much to talk about on that one. Go for it.
Talk about. I think it's also, at the MCG, the portals must have opened because it was the start of the demon days for the Eagles, as they are really lowering their colours at this part of the season. I think we both sort of expected a bit of a higher level performance, and probably in the media too, with some of the players that have come back. But I think I think it's just to highlight how uneven their game plan is at the moment. Again, like if I criticize the Roos for lacking any half ball movement, I've really got to emphasize that West Coast are probably actually worse from it, with far less players. And yeah, as I said, their ball movement just made it too easy for Melbourne. They generated 27 scoring shots to 18 against a West Coast defense, despite, being the most consistent performers out there. Are just getting pummeled again for the second year in a row. As I said, I think their one-dimensional game plan is just like rolling the dice each week and like, can we just win this game from the center? Yes, we can have a good performance. No, we're going to get beaten by like 60 odd plus points. And, as I said, it is really leading to probably, I don't know, I reckon it's just really sad, like how much West Coast defense has technically improved individually, but is still getting beaten. And, I got to talk about it because 2 games close together. But honestly, a couple of people holding their head high. One person holding their high. It's still McGovern. I think it's still leading that defense, playing very well. Barras unfortunately lowered his colours a bit against Van Rooyen. He kicked 4 goals for, and got 5 marks inside 50. But I think McGovern. This might be weird depending on how they want to do All Australian. I know Australian doesn't mean everything, but we could see like 2 bottom 4 teams produce All Australian defenders, and one of them, who I think's a near lock, is McGovern. I mentioned the other one, Lady. I don't think it will be that much of a surprise for you who it will be. But yeah, it's a real possibility. In terms of Melbourne, because they obviously performed great. Trent Rivers really had another great game going back into the midfield.
Mhm.
He had a bit of a deep last week, but was absolutely fantastic. Windsor on the wing had a career game, probably. 25 disposals, 7 score involvements, and a goal from the young kid. Jake Melksham, he's back.
I'm
4
glad they
marks
put him
inside
in
50
instead
and
of
2
trying to
goals.
force him through the VFL.
Yeah, well, I mean, he made an impact. So they obviously they backed in their regiment that they had because I think they said he had 6 training simulations that he had to pass or something weird like that. But yeah, they were just confident in him. A young Thorstrip too. He would enjoy his first goal in the AFL and got a second one as well, I should say. But yeah, he's been playing pretty good on the wing, going up forward, but missed a few. So it's nice to see him get his. And yeah, Alex Neil-Bullen, both of those two sort of outplayed their opponents as they got a bit higher up the ground, sort of playing either on the wing or half forward. Tom McDonald would enjoy feasting on a very tepid inside 50 attack. He quashed Darling, who did try, but yeah, I think he was just ultimately let down by the attacking structure. Flying Ryan, I think, was the other one trying to create sparks in that forward line. But again, I think, in another game, he probably would have had like a few goals and double-digit score involvements. But yeah, West Coast just weren't winning the ball at all. Yeah, that's about all I really want to say. I mean, obviously for Melbourne, it was nice to have a game like that. Um, you know, when they were a bit out of form. But I mentioned last week in the team preview, that Melbourne, despite Melbourne leaking so many goals from defensive half, like the Eagles' ball movement was just so bad.
Yeah.
I didn't think they were able to exploit it. And again, they kicked 1 goal from the back half. They're one of the worst from back half movements. And yeah, as I said, it's a bit of a shame, really, because the ball lives in their back half. So, if you're not scoring from it, as I said, you're really just relying on the opponent to kick a goal so you can get the ball back in the middle. You know what I mean? Like, or you really force a turnover. But obviously, if you don't get it back the other way, it's just like, what's the point? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is there really anything you wanted to say or
Not
was
really. I mean,
highlighting from the little
I
you
didn't really get to
broadcasting?
see any of this game at all,
Yeah.
but from what I've read up, I had a look at the breakdown that they usually release at the end of the game and like some of the highlights. And Melbourne's backline, it's very glad it looks so much better now that Lever's like really back in there.
It was solid. And look, the inside 50s were drawn, um, despite the huge scoring margin.
So it's not like it
Yeah,
was
as I said.
like like a massively bad midfield performance. They were still getting enough in there, but it's just
Yeah.
no
I mean, on the
no
flip side,
conversion. Melbourne's forward line was just way too good for one.
yeah. I was going to say,
Apart from
on the flip
McGovern, the
side,
defense did struggle.
there was some inside 50s left on the board because Melbourne could just score once they got in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but I know what you mean. Like, it was,
I guess not that it was
it
an
was
even midfield
definitely,
game because it was very obviously not. But
mm,
yeah, there was just better conversion rate from Melbourne. And West Coast
yeah,
defenses couldn't handle it.
yeah, exactly. And as I said, like, it's nearly, yeah, it was approaching 100 difference in the disposal, 280 to 356. Um, so as I said, it's just 68 ground ball gets to 88.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure they got smashed in the clearances as well. Oh no, sorry, West Coast won the clearances, but yeah, so just as I said, that's the only dimension to West Coast, and it's pretty, as I said, like they're a one-note team, and that and it's hard to say that because obviously they're good defensively, but that doesn't amount to anything. That just prevents them getting beaten by more.
Yeah.
And, as I said, there will come a time where if it does improve, they still won't have that link up. Like, that's not getting built. So I think that's like the biggest worry coming out of these performances. Obviously, it can turn around. Like, honestly, I might even rate these games worse than the early season games when they were getting pumped. Because I think defensively, as I said, they were still fresh. They were still preventing a lot of easy goals. But as I said, it's just getting concerningly easy for opposition teams at this point. And they just need a statement game late in the season. As there's a few lower opponents who they'll face up against. But yeah, as I said, in terms of, I mean, like you said, North Melbourne, getting a win. As I said, maybe not convincingly, but as I said, it's those type of wins that get, maybe an extra player to your club, or maybe it will convince a draft pick that your system's actually going to work when you draft them. So
exactly right.
Yeah. And a Harley Reid check, he was good. Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't enough for him to give to, but he was good. Yeah.
Hey, it might not be the best selling performance of his career, but it's as long as it's consistent enough to his kind of average standards.
I mean, honestly, compared to normal form, I think he was actually better than Kelly and Tracy. Tracy.
Thinking about Freo too
Kelly
much.
and Yo. Um, but yeah, as I said, not that they did bad. It was just very milquetoast.
Yeah.
By them. It's just as vanilla as you can get.
Well, it's to be expected, I guess. Like, they were up against Melbourne, who were finally in some decent form again. Finally, their structure was back to the way it kind of should be. And granted, it was a Melbourne win against a weak team, and we don't know how Melbourne's going to really look against a better team. But it's a bit of confidence to the players who thought their season might be a little bit in shambles after the past couple of weeks.
Yeah. I will say though, like, again, I don't want to be too critical, but honestly, I think there's still got a few players that really aren't quite there on their list that really, like, in my mind, and it's always hard to say because you're not coaching, but, like, Tyler Brockman, Campbell Chesser, they're just not quite best 22 level. And especially upsetting with Tyler Brockman because he had a lot of potential. Obviously, a bit off field, that's not that great, but as I said, it's really a chance for him to find a nice fit, and like he's not getting much opportunity, with the amount of ball that's going down there, but he's really not presenting that well. And as I said, when you're a team that only has limited attack, like North Melbourne, they have very limited attack, but they are amazing at converting.
Yes.
They're working hard to make sure that every chance they get, they can convert. Which I probably didn't highlight as much in that game. I should say that now. But yeah, as I said, West Coast just don't have that feeling. Like they have unutilized talent still.
Yeah.
Which is a bit
Agreed.
upsetting.
Which is unlucky considering the past couple of years and how much talent they have managed to at least cultivate over in the West.
Yeah.
But they're just not utilizing it in a season where they could have actually really utilized
how disjointed like their last few years have been. But
yeah, they are still recovering a little bit from that. But it's also like this could have been a season where they could have tried to at least solidify what they wanted to do because they had a lot of their injuries back. Like they were actually had like their key players that they could build around. It was just trying to.
And they had that period when they
work.
did get those few big games against Melbourne and against Freo. It's just disappointing how it hasn't formatted anything from that period of the year.
And like maybe the last couple of games at the end of the season could show us something to give us some hope going into next season. But it's kind of slim pickings at the moment.
They could make us forget about this sort of performance, but it'll be a very dire last year if this continues. And just to finish up, the last one I wanted to make, not great news for Melbourne, but Max Gawn looking to miss at least a week due to a ankle issue. They're going to just, sit him on ice for a week. and
I did have that noted down to talk about later, but it is pretty
yeah.
important to kind of mention here whilst we're at it.
I think they have like some former ruckman, like
They do. They
there's
definitely
not
have a
Priest
second
on the
ruckman.
list.
I don't remember who it is, but they
Yeah,
definitely have a second ruckman.
I,
They can play Ben
I
Brown
swear,
in the
like
ruck technically because he's tall enough, but
yeah,
he probably won't be the
I
best
think they
option.
still have Priest on the list, but I am not sure at all.
I have no idea.
He might be retired. I got no idea, but yeah, they'll need to play their second ruckman. Yeah, I just want to see if he's still playing.
You can have a look, and I will
No.
get started on the.
Yeah, no, feel free to. Yeah, I'm done with that.
So we're going to head over to Queensland now. For technically the last game of the round, but definitely not the most interesting game of the round because that will be the last one we talk about. Brisbane and Adelaide up at the Gabba. 14-13-97 to 13-8-86. Adelaide were very spirited, especially in the second half. Their midfield game was definitely lifted in the fourth quarter, and they were pretty close to actually trying to snatch this away from Brisbane, but Brisbane just had a much better performance too early on, and their form that they've been able to keep up at the Gabba has been able to just hold them on going into the second half of this game, and they just won it out. And they're just, still trying to solidify their top 8 position. They're still working on it because they have a ton of other teams that they're vying for. Vying against, I should say. But to their credit, it held up. Lachie Neale, captain, co-captain technically. Strong performance, 36 disposals, 77.8% efficiency, 18 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 9 marks, 10 clearances, 8 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, 3 goals, and 523 meters gained, which was the most of the game, I believe. Surprisingly, he wasn't tagged, which again, we talked about this earlier with the other games about tagging, like when we were talking about Nick Dacos, is that now that they've got Dunkley and they've got McCluggage, and they've got Zorko in like strong ball contested form, they've also got Cam Rayner as well when he's fit. Lachie Neale doesn't get tagged as much, but which is like super interesting to me because that's how it's happened in the previous years, as we talked about.
Yeah,
but yeah, him not getting tagged
I'm just looking
in this game was actually insanely big because you can't let someone like that just run free. He's too good when he has the ball.
However, the one that did cop the tag, according to the game wrap up anyway, Sam Berry, their normal tagger, did go to Dunkley in the third quarter.
Yeah,
who also had a massive game.
Yeah, Dunkley had a huge game.
I know what you mean.
But he's
just like
I'm not going to talk about Dunkley. I'm actually going to talk about someone else. But before I do, I want to talk about the Big O. I think Oscar McInerney had a great game, dominated the ruck, collecting 40 hitouts, plus 40 touches, 9 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 6 score involvements, 3 1%ers, and only a behind. But, still great performance all over the ground as a ruck. It's what you love to see from the Big O. And then the youngster I want to talk about is Darcy Wilmot, actually. 16 touches at 81.3% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 4 inside 50s, 22 pressure strikes, and 5 1%ers. So like he's not an on-baller. He's very much more a defensive player. Intercept, primarily an intercept role, but definitely very important into holding that back line together this week.
Hey, he plays above his age too. Like, it's hard to forget he's only a third-year player, I think.
I believe he's like 2021. So he's like still super young, super green.
He's been pretty much solid every year he's been playing. So it's a bit of a shame because like he does everything that you expect him to. So he doesn't look that flashy, but like his consistency has been absolutely fantastic.
And especially when he's paired up with someone like Zorko, who has been putting up insane performances.
Exactly.
It's like you can't stop that man. You can't stop Lachie Neale. If you put a tag on Dunkley, like everyone else is just going to run free. Especially with McCluggage stepping up as well lately. Harris Andrews in the back as well, co-captain, has always had pretty decent performances. Sometimes gets shut down by stronger forwards, but especially over the past month has been really good. But yeah, Brisbane have been really, really strong in their defensive game. Forwards line, sometimes struggles to convert. 14-13 isn't pretty. Barely positive. but that's like they're very consistent in getting the ball up there. It's just their conversion rate isn't always the greatest.
Yeah. And look, I was only briefly looking at it. I think there was just a slight tinge of messiness to all of Brisbane. Obviously, a few turnovers here and there, which Adelaide were able to capitalize on.
Mm-hmm.
Again, nearly making a comeback. But overall, as I said, when they get the weighted numbers, it's very hard to stop them. Like as I said, even if they do mess up, they're very quick to get the ball back. And yeah, as I said, they've got, I wouldn't say like swarming pressure, but it's more just, again, if the ball ever gets thrown up, you're almost at a disadvantage. It's not a reset; it's advantage to Brisbane.
Yeah.
But once they are able to wrap up a player.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Like their tackle game, their high pressure game is very, very strong in that midfield, and even they've got some pretty strong forward pressure as well. Logan Morris, I do want to actually shout out. I thought he had a great game, even though statistics wise he was a little bit quiet. He had a really good presence up forward alongside Danaher and
that's
Hipwood
been important.
and Charlie Cameron, of course. It's like isn't always the standout player, especially because he's so young. But has been very, very important in having such a presence up forward.
And it's a tough game for Tolls because Adelaide's backline are very good at defending those deep forward entries. And I don't think that was actually that different this game. Like when you look at a lot of the goals, they were either generated from smalls or generated from players that weren't key forwards.
Yeah, exactly right. Like I think Hipwood and Danaher were mostly marking outside 50. So they were probably primarily doing the inside 50 counts, or they were just taking the ball to ground whenever they could.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, like 14-13 is a bit deceptive because you think, oh, that's not that great defensively, but it's the sometimes behinds are like because you've made a team take a bad shot, more than a team's inaccurate.
Exactly right.
Which isn't saying that Brisbane isn't inaccurate, but you know what I mean.
They've definitely had some games where they have been very inaccurate, but
I know that.
Just to talk about some very key players from Adelaide, definitely some important players going forward. Ben Keys, we've talked about him a lot this season. He was very good yesterday as we're recording this. 4 goals from 14 touches, 71.4% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 4 marks, and 7 score involvements. Tex kicked 2, which being their primary tall forward, you'd expect him to have a little bit more of a scoring influence. But he was definitely doing a lot more to support his forwards around him rather than trying to take the load himself, which is actually pretty good for him, considering the history that he's kind of had in more playing like a solo tall role.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't have to do it all himself these days.
No,
he can use his pretty good distribution to more effect now.
Absolutely, especially as he's had to play further up the ground this season as well when he's been on. And then Mark Keane, very good intercept game down back, 20 touches at 85% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 10 intercepts, 7 marks, 6 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 475 meters gained.
Yeah, and honestly, for a position that's very hard to get ranking points, he's both done well in Supercoach points and player ratings as well. So honestly, sometimes I like to give some of these key defenders more credits, even if they haven't statistically gained that. But this is also a game where, found a bit of ball use as well, and this definitely hasn't been too bad and racking up those intercepts.
Yeah, absolutely. We have talked all season about where Adelaide's defense has been. They've certainly struggled, but they have a pretty solid line. Especially this was a very close game, all things considered. So you can definitely give them a lot of credit.
Oh yeah, and it's just again talking about preseason, no one's talking about Mark Keane.
No,
I just know he exists before the start of this season.
I think that
I remember flashes.
2 probably most important defenders have been Keane and Butts. I think they've been very, very important to
Yeah.
that backline structure.
I mean, even Worrell, as said before he got injured, was very good.
Yeah.
So like they've got another player to come back.
Absolutely. And then just a little sad note: Brandon Starcevich out with concussion.
Mm,
We have seen the footage from the game. Isaac Rankin did the hit on him. From the angle that we see, it's only a chest bump, but somehow we think his shoulder hits the chin, and that's when he goes down, and that's how it causes the concussion. But it was yeah, he's gonna apparently miss 4 matches for it, which
mm.
from the angle that we see
Again,
seems pretty high, but clearly the
mm,
AFL must have another angle of the hit that makes it look worse.
yeah. And the fact that, as I said, like the MRO sort of has to be a bit more purely outcome based,
Mm.
just because they're only measuring off 3 metrics. He's got a concussion, so it's got the high impact.
So it's at
The
least
concussion was
minimum
from the
2
head.
there.
So, like, even if it was indirectly from the head, it still counted as directly,
Mm.
you know. So, as I said, I think this is something that will get down with a MRO, with a, what do you call it?
With a
That
challenge.
tribunal.
Yeah.
Um, I think a week off is probably around it. I would have said 2 weeks when I first saw it, but,
If he
yeah,
does
as I said,
actually hit the chin with the shoulder, you could maybe argue it down to 3. But 4 matches just seem a bit
yeah,
high.
yeah, that is pretty much, I think most people would say that, especially. But the biggest thing is yeah, it was off the ball, very unnecessary. He
Yeah.
deserves it's very silly to do once,
It was
especially as you're
absolutely
saying, like,
intentional, and it deserves probably at least a week.
yeah, and especially such an important player for that midfield. I
Mhm.
mean, we see another game where Jordan Dawson, and Joshua Shelley sort of take a bit of a backseat, or even Saligo,
Yeah.
didn't have much of an impact. So, fair to say they were comprehensively beaten in the middle, and yeah, losing Isaac Rankin,
It's definitely
won't
not going to
help for
help
the
them at
future
all.
matches. As yeah, Adelaide are just looking to pinch a few at the back end. Like, I don't think they'll make finals, but I think they'll give anything to try and go back to back in the showdown, which will come later. So
Oh,
yeah.
speaking of key midfielders that might miss the match, shall we move on to St Kilda and Sydney?
Oh yeah, of course. Oh, so much happened. I forgot about that little caveat. But yeah, there was a big implication there. But we'll
I'll touch
get
on
to
that in a
that
bit.
through a bit later. Um, Honestly, I'm not sure if I will say this 100%, but I think this was one of the weirdest games of football played,
Yep.
maybe this year. It was it was ugly, but it was so compelling and entertaining. And the Saints restricting ways has been, I don't know about criticized, but as I said, they've it's like, oh, you can't just restrict teams, you have to find ways to move the ball, which is also fair. Um,
But they
but
managed to do it.
their persistence has paid off. And despite losing a few players, despite facing the top of the ladder, they handed Sydney their second shock loss in a row. Um, Unlike last week, where I think Sydney had huge momentum swings and were well back in the game after halftime,
Hmm.
I think Sydney struggled a lot more. Like, Sydney weren't playing a great game. Despite last week, I think Sydney did enough last week to beat most teams in the AFL. I think Fremantle were just fantastic. This week, I think it was a combination of the Saints just doing enough and Sydney just being poor.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the first time we've had to really say that this year. I was even ranked this lower than the Richmond loss. Um, but yeah, as I said, they were just struggling to get the ball deep enough. Oh, sorry, like the Saints would hamper a lot of Sydney's ball movement in the first half, I would say.
Hmm.
But it was just in the other way. The Saints were getting the ball deep enough. They only scored 4 goals, I think, until halftime. And then halfway through the second, Sydney looked to have the game in the bag. They got a 30-point lead as they rattled an otherwise unflinching Saints defense. Said it was just a quick period of dominance from Sydney. But that would really be it for the Swans. The Saints would again ramp up the forward pressure. Higgins would kick 2 goals and provide plenty of distribution, as did Liam Henry, the world's most awkward position player, finding a bit of form this game. However, 2 goals from Isaac Heaney, a great individual bit of effort. Looked to be the difference going into the last quarter. You think, oh, Swans, one of the best last quarter teams in the competition. They'll get home from here. But the Saints would hold the Sydney Swans goalless in the last quarter as they would kick 4-2 to 0-5 in an effort that would give them a slender victory as Matt Phillippo, again, a former high-touted draft pick, hasn't done all that much, but had a quarter, remember, with 12 disposals, 5 score involvements, and a goal in the last term to give them the shock win, 13-6-84 to 11-16-82. You know, despite that 16, like as I mentioned before, I think a lot of that came from how good the Saints' defense was.
Yep.
And overall, I think there was like, you know, you say this comes out of nowhere and all that, but it was actually like a lot of usual suspects for the Saints. Like this wasn't that against what they've been producing all year. Wilkie, of course, you know, I mentioned before, like a bottom 14 producing an All-Australian defender.
And Cal Wilkie's probably that.
The only thing against him is that he does maybe get outclassed by Wiedering.
Yeah,
honestly,
but
I think
Wiedering's been out of the side more often to not be extremely considered. Because he was injured for like what?
He's got like
I actually
think Wilkie's
like
been better. I don't think it was 6, but he's definitely missed a chunk. But I'm with you. I think Wilkie's been better. I just think Wiedering gets more media time.
Yeah.
And that just sort of influences them. But you know what I'm saying? It's just
I get it.
But yeah, it's a fantastic player. Sinclair, Wangani Milera, Marshall and Steele, all major players of the Saints. Also round up Filippo's disposals. Final disposals. He had 26 overall, 714 meters gained, a team high in clearances, and he was team high in clearances. I forgot what I didn't actually write it down. I'm sorry. I think it was like 7 or 6.
That sounds right. I did look at them before.
Yeah, sorry. So he was tied with 6 clearances, which was team high. He was game high score involvements with 10, 2 goal assists and 1 goal himself. So, you know, I said while it was like defined by his last quarter, it wasn't like he had a bad game overall. Sinclair played hard and clean, 28 disposals, 82% efficiency with 9 ground ball gets and 6 intercepts. Marshall was entwined with Grundy, and although in the center it was like little split them, both sort of nullified each other. And both did a good job nullifying the other's impact, but up forward, Marshall shined with 2 goals that probably could have been 3 if math didn't exist. How we play a game where a ball can bounce like that is absolutely insane.
I know. Damn this oval ball.
I know, and so many flashbacks. I mean, it's been talked to death, but I mean, it was just such a St. Kilda thing to happen. You know, it was almost prophecy that the ball would just go the other way so fast. But credit to the Saints holding on from that. Like, they did everything they could to win that.
And considering Logan McDonald nearly clutched up yet again. Unfortunately, yet again, didn't clutch up.
Yeah, I was going to mention that a bit later, but yeah, as I said, it was just weird how the storylines just wrote themselves this match. But continuing on the Saints, Cooper Sharman stood up on the still prolific Tom McCartan, but he kicked 2 goals from 2 marks inside 50. Dougal Howard, dead no to much of Sydney's attack with 10 intercepts, 3 intercept marks from those, 94% disposal efficiency from 19 possessions, and a goal-saving rush behind that earned him the very begrudged respect from the Sydney cheer squad after he dived into them. If you saw it, it's one of the better moments of the game. And
I saw it. It was pretty entertaining.
Shout out to Sydney cheer squad. Like, they actually like helped him out. Like, that was like a heart-wrenching spoil effort. Like, you would expect maybe a few boos or, you know, a bit of, you know, foul play maybe from other cheer squads, but props for them to pick him up, get him back onto the field. As I mentioned, the much maligned Henry Hill connection actually is starting to pay off.
I was gonna briefly mention Liam Henry because I thought he actually had a much better game this week.
Yeah. And I think Hill was providing a lot from the Hill, but I think the wing as well. But yeah, as I said, it was just something that seems to be working a lot more when I was questioning a lot in the early part of the season.
Mm.
So
We
I
were
should
even,
give
we were
Ross
even
Lyon
questioning it
credit.
last week, to be fair.
Was that? Probably.
I
I'm
was.
very
I
fickle.
definitely was.
Yeah, no, for sure. Um, but yeah, Warner and Heaney were still two bright stars for Sydney. They kicked a couple of goals each, provided great run, distribution both ways. Um, blah, blah, blah. Warner got 29 and 23 and 9 score involvements. Heaney 24 and 10 score involvements.
Mhm.
While Rowbottom had less impact than he has this last month, he still topped the clearances with 6. That was aspect of the game that was still going for Sydney. But again, St Kilda, they've been solid defensively all year from defending clearances. Like, and that's just it for the whole game. Like, as bad as St Kilda's been, I think we just underrate the fact that they're really good defensively. It's just that we don't care because they haven't like had score. You know, it's sort
They're
of undermined that.
they're strong defensively in packs, but they're definitely weaker in 1v1s. Or 1-on-1s, I should say. And like
I think that's
the only other
a fair
ones
point.
that can really stand out against Poggers are like Wilkie, for example.
Yeah,
Marcus
exactly. I
Windhager
think Wilkie
has done a
ties
lot
a
of good
lot of it
work. You
together.
know, there are definitely some players that are better 1-on-1, but
Yeah.
collectively they're better as when they're playing against packs rather than
Yeah,
1-on-1.
and granted that has hurt because of the loss of what's his name? The former Carlton player. Um
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about. I'm blanking on the
yeah,
name.
that's injured. Yeah, Keyback doesn't he's injured anyway. But yeah, that's sort of I mean they're missing him for the season anyway, so it's not that relevant now, but they'll get him back. Um
And
but yeah, as I
hopefully
said,
they just have a much better season next season when they do.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, well, it's another week of pain for Logan McDonald. You've already mentioned that. I think he still provided the best of the toll options.
Absolutely.
They just struggled against the fickle Saints defense this match. He kicked 2 goals free, taking 3 marks into 50. Um, Amadi kicked 3 behinds. I don't think he took a mark inside 50. Maybe it was 1. Um, and yeah, McLean, I think I'm not sure if he kicked the goal, but yeah, he definitely didn't have much of an impact either way. It was definitely, again, Sydney just generating from their midfield like they normally do.
Yeah.
Yeah, McLean just with the one behind, a bit of secondary ruck duties. But yeah, as I said, otherwise pretty, yeah, Saints. And, you know, like I mentioned before, it's just, honestly, this is the normal Saints MO for the longest time. They have one of the best defenses. They just can't generate the other way. Meaning they should have eventually in this match got muscled like they normally do. However, their determination, I think, was pretty unparalleled, leading to some exciting ball movement
Hmm.
that I think was a bit smarter than their normal efforts. Because as I said, they either led to direct score off their halfback movement. They scored 5 goals straight from it,
Hmm.
or they just allowed entries that could actually get locked into their forward half and not be easily dealt with like normal. Like a lot of the times I've been critical that they've kicked a bit too forward into space, and it's just meant that oppositions have like forced either a they've either forced that they've had to win that ball and move the ball forward,
Hmm.
which mean that they've had to push their players high, or as I said, they've nullified the contest, meaning they haven't actually managed to break in the entry because the ball just gets hit to the boundary line. So as I said, making that entry into the just before the forward 50 arc cleaner has allowed them to get better inside 50s. And as I said, they've been able to score a bit more. Very effective too. Again, 13-6, great conversion. And yeah, as I said, it just made their ball movement look a bit, like I said, it looked more exciting, but it was also because of disciplined play, which is again like a lot of their style. It's just, you know, they've been so disciplined in defense, but not that disciplined moving the ball.
Yeah.
And that timed up and it looked a lot better for St Kilda. And obviously for Sydney, you know, it was just enough to keep them at bay. And, you know, that's probably one of the best things for St Kilda is they were able to do it against, you know, still the best in the comp, you know. And it's like, you know, you can say, oh, you know, you don't want to chuck the baby out with the bathwater for South Swans because again, 11-16-82 is still a score, it's still a performance that, you know, it wasn't terrible. It was just lacking.
They
And,
they still performed well, but not to the standards that everyone else kind of has them at currently for this season.
yeah. Yeah, and that's it. It's like they're, you know, you can almost even say, like, St. Kilda don't actually concede plus 80 scores that often. So it's like, in a weird way, it's like not the worst for the Swans in that regard.
No.
But it definitely wasn't like the way they wanted to play. And for St. Kilda to then say, hey, you're not doing that, because they've had other games where they haven't quite got their game going. They've just eventually outmuscled them. Again, it's very different. Like, Frio's 4-quarter effort obviously produced a lot more.
Mhm.
Like, the Saints still have flaws. There's no denying that. But you know what I mean? It's just like, I feel like effort-wise, it was a very similar performance last week against Freo and this week with the Saints.
Yep.
But yeah, as I said, I think Freo and Swans, like the Swans were playing a lot better, and that made Freo play better. Whereas like the Saints did just enough to beat the Swans, not taking that away like from where the Saints are. Like, this was a terrific performance. It's one that should get them up and going in terms of form and excitement. But yeah, as I said, the Saints will still be the Saints. Don't get me wrong, but as I said, it was just fantastic to see. And as I said, they shut out the best last quarter team in the comp.
Mm.
We talk about West Coast defense getting pummeled week in, week out, and they're your head sort of goes down. You're like, oh, I'm trying so hard, but not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And for Saints, like, this is definitely a reward for what is more often than not a solid, consistent performance by their defensive players. So
I know there was a specific word you were trying to look for that, like, to describe them.
no,
but...
I'm still trying to remember the player that used to play for Carlton. Yeah.
I think I can picture him. Is he? No. I don't know. Might have to just look at that list if you want.
Yeah, no.
You pretty much done about that game?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. So whilst you're looking for that player, I assume, I'm going to quickly go through the MRO reports. We've already kind of mentioned them throughout the games anyway, but Georgiadis will miss one match for striking Nick Caulfield. Isaac Heaney, well, as I alluded to before, will miss one match for striking Jimmy Webster. It was not a pretty look. It was. So I don't know if he cannot get this downgraded to just a fine. He is going to be out of Brownlow contention, which is massive considering the season that he's had.
Yeah.
Which goes back to our conversation before about Zach Merritt being a sneaky chance. With and Cripps and Bontempelli still probably currently leading. And then Isaac Rankin, as we mentioned earlier, missed 4 matches for the hit on Brandon Starcevic. Could get downgraded. We don't know.
I think 3. Yeah, that's my prediction.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be 3.
I mean, it'll probably be out when, we'll probably know by the time this is out, but yeah.
And then before we go into the season ladder and the games coming up, the Rising Star has been announced, and it goes to Darcy Jones of Greater Western Sydney.
Okay. Yeah. As I mentioned him as one of the better performers of the round. As I said, it was a fantastic performance. Very involved. And to be like a working cog in what was a very solid attacking performance. Didn't look out of place. I think it's only his 3rd or 4th game.
He was picked 21 in the 2022 draft. So, and it's only his 2nd season. Because he made his AFL debut last year. No, he didn't, because he made his debut this year in round 7, and he's kicked at least 1 goal in 4 of his 5 games. This is the game just gone against Carlton was his first game back at AFL level after a hamstring injury. And he's just been very prolific since arriving on the scene for this young side. And to the Giants' credit, it's their 2nd Rising Star nominee of the season, joining Harvey Thomas, who we talked about earlier as well.
Yeah,
So it's
I'll say, in unrelated news, Zane Cordy is who I'm thinking of.
that's who it is. I could picture him, but I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
he's
think
still
he's a
on their
former
list, and he
Bulldog
is
as well.
currently injured.
Yes.
Because I know I have
Um,
talked about him a few times this season.
yeah.
um,
Yeah, I think he'd come back, and maybe Liam Stocker. Um, I think, yeah. Yeah, that's who I was referring to before.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, they could if they get those players back. St. Kilda 100% have a solid defense again. That's definitely a lot more threatening than what it has been.
More defense. Batten down the hatches.
All right, that wraps up the season. So let's just quickly go through the ladder. Top five does not change at all. Sydney, Carlton, Freo, Essendon, and Geelong all currently solidified top five spots. Port Adelaide.
Essendon go back under
No,
100%.
Essendon do go back under 100%. They're on 99.9, which is very memeable. Port Adelaide, Brisbane, and GWS take the following three spots to round out the top eight for the end of the round. Collingwood drop out of the eight and into ninth position. Melbourne move up into 10th with their emphatic win. The Western Bulldogs and the Gold Coast Suns drop down to 11th and 12th. Hawthorn stays at 13th. Thankfully, they should be all right going towards the end of the season. Might push into a final spot, but it's going to be very, very close considering how close the season already is. St. Kilda have moved out of the bottom four and into 14th position.
St. Kilda or Adelaide have their own mini season battle. They're not going to make the top eight.
No, but they don't want to be
four.
They don't want to be the bottom four. So in that case, Adelaide does move into 15th position. West Coast doesn't move at all. With their 3 wins, they stay at 16th. North Melbourne jumps up to 17th with their win over the Suns. And Richmond dropped down to 18th position.
Yeah, pretty much bottom 3 is almost locked.
I'd say so. It's just going to be... It can definitely still rotate around, but I don't... Those 3 teams are probably going to stay bottom 3, sadly.
And a lot more good predictable... I know I said Hawthorn, I thought was a lockdown there, but I got 3 or 4 of them right, so...
yeah, see, whereas I'm pretty sure at the start of the season, I disagreed with you that Hawthorn was going to finish bottom 4.
Maybe.
Well, we will review that in the bye between season and finals.
Maybe. Yeah, I was going to say, we'll probably get the ladder up, but I've got plenty other wrong too.
Oh, yeah.
I'll focus on the other things.
I'm sure.
There's plenty to be wrong about.
All right, let's quickly run through the games coming up. Collingwood and Geelong at the MCG, Friday night blockbuster. I think, based on form,
honestly,
you'd probably just go Geelong on this one, really.
Yeah, especially with how weak Collingwood's backline's been. I mean, it's obviously been the problem sans 2 weeks ago that Geelong had, and now it seems like Collingwood's got it. They're a bit out of form. The best thing about it is they're playing at the G at their home turf. But, yeah, and it's not impossible for Collingwood. Depends how the midfield matchup goes.
But... I think the midfield matchup will be very, very fun to watch. It's going to be certainly very interesting, but it's going to depend on Collingwood's backline as to whether Geelong get a high-scoring game or they get a close game.
Yeah, and again, like we mentioned before, it'll be interesting where they play Tom Stewart because, I think they would be the sort of person that might tag Stewart if he did stay in defence. They have a few forwards that can play that pressure role. I don't think they have played McCreary anymore. I think McCreary
is still out. Yeah.
Yeah, but as I said, they would play another player like him. Try and nullify that role. So interesting if he goes in the pure midfield. Heck, put him on Nick Dacos.
That would be an interesting matchup to watch.
With defenders on him, would he actually struggle with a pure defender on him on the midfield? Maybe
Nick
that's
Dacos,
next.
This could be the very first time Nick Dacos gets 0 disposals.
Maybe. Or 0 disposal efficiency, maybe. But look, I mean, he's too good a player for that. But
yeah, he is.
It's interesting nevertheless. We'll see. I'll tip Geelong by a small margin.
Yeah, I think I will too. All right, next matchup. Hawthorn and Freo down in Tassie. Now this is an interesting game. However, with no Sicily, it still doesn't really put the Hawks in much favour.
Yeah, I mean, it does, but what is interesting, I think, is just like two great outside teams. Obviously, Freo like to go outside to insert a bit more than Hawthorn like to, but both are very creative with their ball movement, going from defensive to forward line. Um, Obviously, Hawthorn did lower their colours last week,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very hard to tip them against a Freo side that looks like coming into form. However, if we're talking about like tough grounds to mid the bowl, that might just nullify, the fact that I just brought up. It's hard
It is.
to
Down
play
in
in
Tassie, it's
Tasmania, and
very
it
hard.
is hard to play as controlled as Freo like to play. Um, so I will say that, in terms of both team wanting to set up an uncontested game, I think Hawthorn might have the advantage just because they're playing at
In Tassie.
Tasmania.
Yeah.
Whether it's enough to sway my tip, I'm not sure.
I
Jeez,
it
it's
it depends
smoky.
on what they do with the back line, but no Sicily is whether it's going to sway my tip. Because I want to
Yeah,
tip them because every time I've tipped them down in Tassie, they've won because they always look good in Tassie. But
yeah.
with no Sicily, and it's definitely showed last week that no
Mhm.
Sicily really causes issues with their back line.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I said, but it also depends because Freo Assassin, when Freo don't move the ball inside 50 well, they look woeful.
Mm.
Like their entries can be appalling, and it hasn't happened in a while. And I credit Freo to that. But like UTAS is it's the sort of stadium where that can happen. So I'm
Yeah.
like, it's not out the park, and I'm not saying Freo should be scared or I'm expecting a bad performance, but this is the type of game I can see Freo losing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So
I'd still probably logically I'd still back them ish. I might be spicy and tip off on though.
I'm 50-50 at the moment, but I'm probably going to lean the Hawks. I have a little bit of faith in them. But yeah, Sicily is the main concern for me. All right, Sydney and North Melbourne at the SCG. Sydney. I mean, I know we just saw Freo beat them up in Sydney,
Mm,
but North Melbourne isn't as good as Freo at this point in time. If it was being played at Marvel, I would actually kind of
agree.
sway
Oh, they're
North.
lazy.
I would actually sway North a little bit more if it was played at Marvel, just because
Yeah, I know.
just because of the performance they just had against the Suns. It was
Yeah.
very emphatic, gave them a lot of hope. And Sydney also just lost at the exact same location. But because it's up
Yeah, like
there,
as I said, I don't want to be like a North Melbourne hater. Like as I said, like I'm not saying that their wins are like or their form's been a bit
no, I think Sydney.
specious
I think Sydney
or
is still in probably part of some of the best form they've ever
yeah,
been in, apart from what just happened. But against North, you just kind of back Sydney in straight up.
yeah, as I said, it's just there's enough to suggest that yeah, as I said, against, you know, the upper echelon team like
It
Sydney, like it's a big difference between Sydney and the Gold Coast.
yeah,
And I think North,
you kind of expect this game to just be like a percentage boost for Sydney.
yeah, as I said, I don't think North will disgrace themselves. I think they should continue on some nicer trends.
Yeah,
But yeah, as I said, like in terms of realist, like there's some people that will probably be like, ah, North, but yeah, like I think it's a very fool's gold, smoky pick.
I agree.
But I would like to see it. Like if they can keep it between 20, like
If
I
North
would.
can make it a
They might
closer
have enough
game,
of them.
you'd want to be pretty
Mm,
happy with that.
exactly.
All right, the Bulldogs and the Blues at Marvel Stadium. This one could really also go either way, but I realistically you'd probably just back Carlton in.
Honestly, I would most definitely back Carlton in. Like I think the only thing against Carlton is that you know that the Bulldogs will be able to generate score going the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but on the flip side, Western Bulldogs are just Carlton, but that aren't as good. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's not that much difference in the way they approach football. Carlton have proved that they've got people and positions all around the ground that can score a bit more. Like maybe at their best, I would say the Western Bulldogs forward line could be better, but that's a bit of a stretch.
just a bit, but
Um,
that's fine.
yeah, but as I said, especially not now. Like probably going to miss Norton. Oh, sorry, definitely missing
Oh,
Norton.
definitely going to miss Norton.
Jamara Eaglehagen doesn't really... It's been okay sometimes when it's been solo forward, but you know what I mean? It's just...
There's
It
not
just
enough up
limits
there at
the
the moment.
options. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I just see Carlton winning quite comfortably. Honestly, I'm more likely to see Carlton winning by over 30 than the Western Bulldogs winning it all.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, Adelaide and St Kilda at the Adelaide Oval. This one could be a very interesting matchup.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's weird. It's like both teams wanting to find their attack, but in like totally different ways. Obviously, Adelaide's attack, I think, has actually been pretty decent the last few months.
Mm-hmm.
I think, honestly, they've been unlucky to have dropped a couple of their games, despite looking okay. And then we've just got St Kilda that's just plucked one out of nowhere, for lack of a better term.
I mean, it could give them enough inspiration to try and take on a side like Adelaide at home. That fact.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like St Kilda's defensively are better than Adelaide. It's just, as I said, the stark difference between their defense and their forward line. And again, it's like, even after this week, it's not like their forward lines magically fix themselves.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, it would take a lot of players playing better than their form for me to expect St Kilda to win this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, I could see this being like a mucky performance. Like, I think like it would have to be a pretty nail contest for St Kilda to win this again. I don't think it's actually out of the question. I think Adelaide. I will say another thing that's making me doubt Adelaide is their losing Rankin.
Yeah,
They've got a
Rankin's
few
gonna
players
hurt.
in the midfield that can get shut out, and St Kilda are very good at that. So, yeah, as I said, the worst thing about this game is if St Kilda's going to win, it's going to be very ugly.
Yeah,
Again.
absolutely.
Like, even worse than the Sydney game. I don't know. I'm actually like more thinking about it the more I am to just see St Kilda, but I think it should be Adelaide. I don't know. I'll maybe switch. I'm not sure.
I'm kind of leaning towards Adelaide just because of home ground advantage, but I think St Kilda could definitely put up an interesting ugly performance.
Yeah, it's a very weird matchup to think about head to head, but yeah, as I said, I don't know. When it comes to tipping, I don't think about it as much as I do on here.
No, yeah, that's true.
I just click buttons.
So sometimes we just get lucky. All right, Saturday night blockbuster at the MCG, Melbourne and Essendon.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't actually really know where to lean here, to be honest. Because I think
look, I think
Melbourne have finally figured out
I think
their structure issues a little bit better. Essendon are in decent form, and but they're still kind of working out the entirety of their forward line. Because, like, you know, sometimes Jimmy Peter is quiet, sometimes Langford's quiet. They're still trying to work some of that out.
I think Essendon will get the ball in their forward line enough, and I think head to head, I'd actually take Essendon's midfield over Melbourne's.
Yeah, I would too.
It's just what they do when the ball goes forward, because Melbourne can stifle them, and you know, as I said, Essendon's a team that will let you score a bit off turnovers. Like, it's not the worst in the league, but it does tend to keep other teams in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, Essendon are a controlling team, but they're not perfect, as you said. I said they don't have like as clean a forward line structure as Carlton do, for example. So it'll keep Melbourne in the game. Honestly, pretty line ball. I'll say like maybe a 55 Essendon to 45.
Yeah, I think purely based on midfield battle, I think Melbourne's defense will probably hold up fairly well. But I think just Essendon's midfield structure and ball movement through the midfield is just going to probably win it for them.
Yeah.
And provided, you know, Langford, Stringer, Nate Caddy, if they start him, and Peter Wright, if they're able to at least try and present a lot better and try and get in front of Lever and May especially, it should be a very strong contest.
Well, at the very least, it makes them play 1v1 rather than influencing other contests.
Yeah.
So, you know, as I said, it's two steps. There's A, you've got to present well, and B, you've got to have a leading lane that separates those two players. And they've got the forward line to do it. It's just, you know,
it's just whether they
how
present.
far out of the way they go to do that.
Yeah, exactly right.
You know,
All right, Sunday games. Gold Coast Suns and Port Adelaide up on the Gold Coast.
I want you to lead this one, Blazy. I want to hear your opinion before I say mine.
If you really want my opinion, I think it's going to go the Suns' way. But
What
I do have
trash opinion.
I do have a but on this.
Wow.
I think Port need to have a strong showing away from home. Not specifically because they've been bad away from home. Like, they have won some pretty decent games away from home. But I think the Suns are really, really strong at home. They know their ground. It's like their fortress, like the Gabba is for Brisbane. It's really hard to beat the Suns on their own ground. And you need to try and, well, one, end that win streak, for one. And two, prove that you are a top 8 team, Port Adelaide. Prove that you can have midfield structure. You can have strong forward structure, that your players can actually convert. And you can shut down the midfielders on the Suns that generate a lot of their forward 50 momentum. For the Suns, it's just about limiting Port Adelaide's ball movement. Shutting down their tools in their forward line is also very strong. Is also a very strong point they should try and focus on. Overall, I definitely think it's going to be a close contest. At the moment, I am leaning towards the Suns, purely because it's on home and they know how to play that ground best. But I definitely think Port Adelaide can take it away from them and prove that they are beatable at home, and prove that maybe the Suns aren't worthy of a top 8 spot this season.
That's fair enough. I think that's a pretty honest assessment of it. Like, honestly, I know I said last time, I think my last bold call of Port smashing a team was Port versus Collingwood, and then they ended up getting smashed. But I try to be honest this year as much as I can, and I think Port's going to comfortably beat the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to just be a lot, because Port are one of the best at limiting opposition disposals, which is a huge part of Gold Coast, part of the game.
It is.
And B, Gold Coast are just way too uncontested. They don't really put enough pressure around players in the ground. And I think it's going to be similar to like what we see in the Bulldogs, where, if you give Port enough, and also I guess it depends on the conditions that people first stadium. Obviously, it's not always nice, but it being a Sunday afternoon game. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it is Sunday afternoon.
Yes, it is afternoon. Well, obviously, it's in WA. It's played in the AM, but just the fact that it is played at that time where it's not as greasy, I think goes in Port's favour. And yeah, as I said, it's just like, I don't know whether it's just the arrogance of the way that Port's record is against the Gold Coast, but it just smells like a matchup that they love.
Yeah, I agree.
But again, I could just be arrogant. I don't know. You can laugh at me. The good thing is you can just laugh at me.
I think your assessment is very fair. And as you said, I think my assessment is very fair. Yeah, it's honestly one of those games that could genuinely go either way. It depends on who shows up.
Yeah, I guess.
For the time being, I am swinging the Suns. But if something like maybe ins and outs might actually sway me, because I know Jared Witts is out at the moment, but he could come back. Like, that key ruck is very important, stuff like that.
That's pretty big.
Took Miller being out could actually be a massive factor, little things like that.
And Sam Day, obviously, as
well.
Yeah,
that too. All right, Richmond versus GWS at the MCG. I'm expecting I will be at this game. I will be trying to cheer us on as hard as I can. I'm not expecting us to win by any means, especially if the Giants have found form again.
Yeah.
I just want it to be close.
Yeah.
That's all I ask. Just do the best with what you have. And honestly, what I'm really excited for is the matchup between Nank and Kieran Briggs.
Yeah, honestly, too. Obviously, Nank isn't young anymore, but like Kieran Briggs is probably like Nank. It's that weird thing. Is like Nank at Kieran Briggs' age reminds me a lot of Kieran. I've totally forgotten. You know what I mean? It
reminds you of another.
There's a lot of similarities in their development. Yeah. So,
And I mean,
yeah,
as the statistics kind of show, Nank currently is the second best ruck in the comp. So
look, as I said,
I want it to be a very good matchup.
yeah, I sort of agree with you, but I also would put him second, probably.
Do I think he's
Don't
going to get
ask
an
me
All
why
Australian nomination? Probably not.
No.
I think that's going to go to Brody Grundy or Max Gawn.
Yeah.
And maybe Tristan Xerri, because I think he's had a really great season, despite
Yeah,
North Melbourne's
exactly.
performances. But like statistics wise, that's what
Oh,
the statistics say.
Exactly.
Anyway, yeah, I'm currently leaning Giants. I'm expecting Giants. No one should really be
I think the
expecting
best thing
Richmond to
about
win, but
Richmond is that I think teams that have actually nullified GWS have been a bit better performance-wise.
Hmm.
And Richmond, I'm not going to call them a nullified midfield because they're not, but they at least provide pressure, can force turnovers, and that is an avenue where they could stifle GWS.
and we have the
obviously.
defensive line to be able to shut down
Hmm.
Hogan, to be able to shut down Green, to shut down O'Halloran.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite go shut down, but at least
nullify their performances in
Yeah,
terms of marking
exactly.
contests.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, as I said, I don't think it's bleak, but as I said, I can, yeah,
Not as hopeful as
I
one
would
would
just
like.
imagine GWS running away with it at some point.
Pretty much. All right, last game of the round: West Coast and the Brisbane Lions at Optus Stadium. Again, based on form, you go Brisbane by a fair margin on this one.
Yeah.
You'd like to hope that West Coast
Nothing that West
give
Coast
you
has
something.
done in the last month has given me any iota of hope for them. Unfortunately, I know that sounds harsh, but it really has been quite dismal.
I'd like them to show
and Brisbane
something, but I think the Lions midfield is too strong. I think the Lions defense is too strong.
Yeah, they can flip it. Like they've turned around form other times, but yeah, as I said, I wouldn't tip them 10-foot pole until they can prove me wrong.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was like that with St.Kilda, and then all of a sudden they prove me wrong when I don't tip them. So,
Oh man, yeah. I mean,
we've
it
seen
would be like
bigger
5
miracles.
St Kilda fans who tipped them against Sydney. So
we've certainly seen bigger miracles when it comes to this.
maybe it would be quite the form turnaround, though.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I think that will do it for us for this week. Thank you all so much for coming and hang out with us. It's been quite a long episode. I apologize, but there was a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting games. We did kind of ramble on a bit, and some bits we probably shouldn't have rambled on, but sometimes it makes for great content. Please follow us on socials, mine as well. I will be streaming tomorrow, aka Tuesday. So the next, actually, I won't be streaming the following Tuesday. That'll be talked about later because that's later stuff. Anyway, follow us on the socials. Give us some love. Give the podcast itself some love on YouTube and Spotify. We really appreciate it. Or as always, please, if you have anything you want us to directly talk about, please send it to us. Or if you're friends with us, just DM it. We're always open to chat. And yeah, we're looking forward to the games ahead. And we will hopefully see you all for episode 21 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Nick and Blaze. So, catch you later. Goodbye.